Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by kelizuasta on Wattpad. Now let's start. A small boy named Izuku Midoria called out to his friend as they climbed the hill behind the park they often visited, expressing his struggle to keep up. His childhood friend, Katsuki, urged him to return to their mothers if he couldn't manage. Izuku, breathing, attempted to catch his breath, revealing his difficulty with speech. Only Katsuki could fully understand him, but doctors had assured them that with practice, Izuku would improve over time. The two boys, both 5 years old, were determined to master their quirks, despite the doctor's doubts about Izuku's ability to control his. They trekked up the mountain daily, fueled by their dreams of becoming heroes. Katsuki aspired to be the #1 hero, while Izuku wished to protect others from the shadows. Upon reaching their destination, Katsuki noticed Izuku was no longer beside him. Assuming his friend had returned to their mothers, he began training with his quirk. Meanwhile, Izuku had encountered a striking man with blue hair and captivating red eyes. He innocently complimented the man, who was taken aback by the boy's kindness. Feeling a sense of empathy, Izuku hugged the man, reassuring him that he was not scared. The man, curious about Izuku's mother, offered to take him with him, but Izuku declined, stating that his mother wouldn't allow it. The man then cast a spell, enveloping them in a purple mist, and suddenly, Izuku found himself in a windowless room with only a bed and a single door. The man assured him he would not be harmed and gently left the room, leaving Izuku feeling frightened and confused but also determined to cheer him up. Shigaraki, the man who had taken Izuku, was frustrated with himself. He had intended to distract the boy to kidnap Katsuki, but he found himself charmed by Izuku's innocence and sweetness. No one had ever called him pretty before, and the boy's presence stirred feelings he had long suppressed. He considered the possibility of keeping Izuku around, believing it could bring joy to everyone. Remembering his longing for a little brother to care for, he resolved to speak with his emissary about keeping Izuku safe. Back with Katsuki, 2 hours had passed, and it was getting darker. Concerned, he decided to return to his mother and inform her about his new quirk development. Upon arrival, he found his mother and Aunt 𝐼𝐻𝐬 conversing but no sign of Izuku. When he approached them, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 asked about Izuku's whereabouts, and his mother expressed her worry that he had been left behind. Katsuki explained that he had told Izuku to return when he noticed he was lagging behind, and now he was missing for 2 hours. Alarmed, the two mothers contacted the police, who searched the woods and surrounding areas but found no trace of the green-haired boy. After extensive searching, Izuku Midoria was officially declared a missing person. A month later, at the League of Villains base, Shigaraki and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 were watching the news about Izuku's case. The report stated that it had been a month since the 5-year-old boy had disappeared during a trip to the park, and the police had declared him deceased due to a lack of leads. Relieved that the investigation would not continue, Shigaraki and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 felt a strong attachment to Izuku, enjoying their time with him. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 appreciated the boy's politeness, while Shigaraki cherished their playful moments together. Though Izuku had initially been scared, he gradually warmed up to them. Shigaraki decided to visit Izuku, instructing 𝐼𝐻𝐬 not to interrupt unless it was urgent. Upon entering the room where Izuku was kept, he found the boy still asleep. Smiling, he gently shook Izuku awake. As Izuku opened his eyes and greeted him with a hug, Shigaraki felt warmth at the affectionate nickname the boy had given him. They spent the next few hours playing games and creating drawings together. Izuku proudly presented a painting depicting the 3 of them holding hands, calling it a family picture. Izuku beamed with joy as he admired the painting. He suggested to Shigaraki that it should be placed in a picture frame for safekeeping. Shigaraki, with a gentle smile, returned the artwork to Izuku after carefully placing it in a bright red frame. Izuku hugged the framed painting tightly to his chest, his happiness evident. 3 years passed, and Izuku was now 8 years old, still living with the League of Villains. To keep him safe from the other members, he remained in the room where he had first been kept. Over time, He had grown accustomed to this new life, referring to Shigaraki as his big brother and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 as his mama. They cared for him deeply, though a sense of guilt lingered in their hearts for having taken him from his family. They understood Izuku's dream of becoming a hero. He had even crafted an 𝗟𝗚𝐻𝐻 plushie and had developed skills in painting, building, and creating. Although he still struggled with speech, it didn't matter to them. They loved him, and he loved them in return. Occasionally, Izuku would miss his childhood friend and wish for a reunion, but he feared the consequences for his family. 4 more years went by, and Izuku was now 12 years old, still confined to his room, which had transformed into a personal space filled with memories. The walls showcased pictures of him with his big brother and mama, alongside various hero-themed plushies he had made of his favorite characters, including Present Mic, Hawks, 𝗟𝗏𝐿, and even Izu. His beloved 𝗟𝗚𝐻𝐻 plushie was always in his hand, a constant reminder of his aspiration to be like his hero. The League had been training him to strengthen his quirk and ensure he could protect himself. When he asked why he needed to be strong, Shigaraki replied that he didn't want to lose his little brother. Izuku smiled and embraced him, unaware of the deeper reasons behind his brother's concern. 𝗼𝐻𝐬 had been helping Izuku with his speech, but he could only manage a few words and struggled to form complete sentences. Another 3 years passed, and Izuku was now 15, having forgotten much of his past life. He embraced his new existence, though thoughts of his childhood friend occasionally crossed his mind. He had just completed a large painting depicting what he imagined his friend might look like now. The League had gradually shifted away from their villainous activities, focusing instead on caring for Izuku, though he remained unaware of this change. One day, Shigaraki entered the room where Izuku was busy. Izuku excitedly jumped on him, calling him his brother. Shigaraki asked if he had finished his painting, and Izuku proudly showed it to him. With a hint of sadness, Shigaraki instructed Izuku to gather his most cherished belongings. Confused but obedient, Izuku collected the picture he had drawn of himself, Shigaraki, and 𝗼𝐻𝐬, along with his 𝗟𝗚𝐻𝐻 plushie. He approached Shigaraki, asking why he needed to do this. 𝗼𝐻𝐬 then entered and revealed that Izuku was going back. The words shocked Izuku, and he felt his heart sink as he questioned whether they still loved him. 𝗼𝐻𝐬 reassured him that they did love him, but he deserved a life outside of their care. Izuku began to cry, pleading to stay with them. Shigaraki, tears in his eyes, expressed their love for him and the difficult decision they had made. As a portal opened, Izuku fell onto a secluded beach, clutching his plushie and picture tightly to his chest. Overwhelmed by emotions, he sat on the sand and wept. Hearing footsteps nearby, Izuku felt fear wash over him, having only known Shigaraki and 𝗼𝐻𝐬 for the past decade. A group of people appeared, their expressions filled with concern. Among them, a familiar figure caught his eye, and he gasped as he recognized the voice of his childhood friend. The boy, with bright red eyes, stuttered as he called out to him. Izuku slowly looked up, tears glistening in his eyes, and his heart raced as he saw the boy he had just painted standing before him. With his picture and plushie in hand, he called out the name he had always used for him. Earlier that day, Katsuki had been lost in thought, reflecting on the 10 years since Izuku had gone missing. He felt different, consumed by anger and regret. The police had declared Izuku dead, but no body had ever been found. The only friend he had left was Kirishima, but his mind was constantly occupied with thoughts of Izuku. He wished he had been more vigilant or acted sooner to prevent his disappearance. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Kirishima, reminding him that they were heading to the beach to train. After quickly changing into his workout clothes, Katsuki joined his classmates in the common room. They had been training for about an hour when they heard crying from the other side of the wall. Concerned, they went to investigate and found a boy on the floor, wearing an oversized shirt that looked worn and familiar. As he noticed the green hair, realization struck him. It couldn't be, but it was. He called out, unsure if it was really him. When the boy looked up, Katsuki was captivated by his striking green eyes and freckles, which reminded him of stars. He was appealing. Overwhelmed, he rushed forward, disregarding the curious stares of his classmates, and embraced the small boy, relief flooding through him. At 6 years old, Izuku stood at 6, 7, while Katsuki appeared to be around 5. Despite his tears, Izuku felt Katsuki wrap an arm around his waist, clutching his shirt. Overwhelmed with emotion, Izuku couldn't believe it was him. Katsuki, still struggling to articulate his thoughts, repeated his name excitedly. Aizawa and the class were taken aback by the typically angry blonde showing such vulnerability toward another person. Aizawa approached the two and inquired about the situation. Katsuki wiped his eyes and held Izuku tightly from behind, revealing that Izuku Midoria had gone missing 10 years ago and was presumed dead. He was Katsuki's childhood friend, and the revelation brought a smile to his face. The entire class was stunned. They had all heard about the small boy who had vanished without a trace a decade ago. Izuku felt nervous surrounded by so many unfamiliar faces but found comfort in Katsuki's presence. Leaning into Katsuki's chest, he glanced around, noticing a red-headed boy beaming at Katsuki and waving enthusiastically. Shyly, Izuku looked away, his cheeks flushed, until his gaze landed on a man standing a couple of meters away. Recognizing him as his favorite hero, Izuku's excitement overwhelmed him, and he yelped, burying his face in Katsuki's chest. Aizawa, concerned for the small child, asked Katsuki if Izuku was all right. Katsuki questioned Izuku about his reaction, and Izuku looked up, blushing as he tried to express his feelings about meeting his idol. Aizawa observed the boy's struggle to articulate his thoughts and concluded that he must be nervous. Katsuki, however, noticed Izuku's attempt to say something significant. Izuku's face lit up as he remembered his 𝐒𝐻𝐬 plushie, which he excitedly shoved into Katsuki's face, causing the taller boy to stumble back slightly. When Katsuki recognized the plushie, he laughed and ruffled Izuku's hair, prompting a giggle from him. Aizawa asked what was happening, and Katsuki held up the homemade 𝐒𝐻𝐬 plushie, explaining that Izuku had been trying to say the hero's name. Izuku nodded enthusiastically, confirming his admiration for 𝐒𝐻𝐬. The class found him utterly adorable, and Aizawa felt a slight blush creeping onto his face as he inquired about the plushie's origin. Izuku beamed with pride, sharing that he had made it. Katsuki smiled at him, impressed by his talent. Kirishima, curious, asked why Izuku spoke the way he did. Katsuki explained that Izuku had always struggled with his speech as a child, but he had been working on it with vocal exercises. Since his disappearance, things had changed. Izuku, feeling a bit pouty, chimed in that he could talk better now, and the class cooed at his cuteness. Katsuki agreed, acknowledging Izuku's progress. Aizawa suggested taking Izuku to you for a checkup and calling a detective for questioning, offering for Katsuki to stay with him. Izuku looked up at Katsuki in awe, amazed that he was in you. Katsuki smirked, reminding him that he had promised to be number one. Izuku's face lit up with pride as he held up one finger, giggling at the thought. As they walked to you, Aizawa noticed a change in Katsuki's demeanor. He was gentle with Izuku, holding his hand and ensuring he didn't trip. Upon arriving at the police station, they sat in a room with a metal table, waiting for the detective. Soon, Detective Tsukachi entered, carrying a file. He greeted Aizawa with a nod before opening the case file for Izuku. Tsukachi introduced himself to Izuku, explaining that his quirk allowed him to detect lies and asking if he could ask a few questions. Izuku's eyes widened in excitement at the mention of the detective's quirk, and he expressed a longing to test it. Katsuki repeated Izuku's words for the detective, who was surprised by the boy's enthusiasm. Tsukachi agreed to let Izuku test his quirk, and the boy smiled brightly, pondering what to say next. Determined, Izuku declared that he wanted to be like 𝐒𝐻𝐬, which made Tsukachi nudge Aizawa, causing him to blush. Katsuki chuckled at the interaction. Tsukachi explained that all Izuku needed to do was answer his questions, and Katsuki would repeat them for clarity. Izuku nodded, ready to cooperate. The questioning began, with Katsuki translating Izuku's responses. When asked about the events surrounding his disappearance, Izuku shared that he had heard a whisper and encountered a man who looked sad. He had told the man he was pretty and given him a hug, wanting to comfort him. The man had invited him to join him, but he had declined, stating that he wouldn't be allowed. Suddenly, everything around him turned purple, and he found himself in a room devoid of windows, with only a door. He was informed that he would be staying there. Tsukachi inquired about the man Izuku had seen, to which Katsuki responded that the man had referred to himself as Brother Siggy. Tsukachi was puzzled by the mention of a brother. Katsuki continued, explaining that the man had initially been scared but that the men had never harmed him, and he had grown fond of them. They were kind. One was his big brother Siggy, and the other was Mama. Tsukachi expressed disbelief, asking if the men had truly never harmed him in all those 10 years. Izuku confirmed this with a simple, no. The three were taken aback by the revelation that he had been kidnapped for a decade yet had not been hurt at all, and he even cared for his captors. Tsukachi pressed further, asking how Izuku had managed to escape and reach the beach. Izuku looked down, sadness washing over him as tears began to fall. The men were confused, and Katsuki pulled Izuku into a comforting hug, gently stroking his hair. He reassured Izuku that it was okay to share his feelings. Sniffling, Izuku looked up and spoke about how he didn't want to leave as Mama and brother had told him he could go and become a hero, saying they loved him. Mama had taken him to the beach. Katsuki asked if that meant they had let him go so he could pursue his dream of being a hero. Izuku nodded sadly, expressing how much he missed them. After their questioning concluded, Aizawa escorted the boys back to the dorms, puzzled by why the villains would kidnap Izuku without causing him harm. He wondered why they had allowed him to go. They deduced that the two men were Shigaraki and Kurogiri from the League of Villains and noted how the League had gradually stopped appearing over the past few years. Katsuki's perspective shifted as they returned to the dorms. He took Izuku to his room and offered him a change of clothes. The clothes were too big, leaving Izuku in a black jumper that reached past his knees and knee-high socks, which Katsuki found adorable. Izuku shared stories from the past 10 years, including a painting he had made of what he imagined Katsuki looked like now. Despite being happy with the League of Villains, he had always thought of Katsuki and wanted to see him. Katsuki expressed that he had missed Izuku too and suggested they get some rest after a long day. Izuku nodded and climbed into bed beside him, cuddling into his chest. He looked up and asked if Katsuki had a girlfriend. Katsuki was taken aback, unsure why Izuku was asking, but he quickly clarified that he was gay. He worried Izuku might be upset, but Izuku merely looked confused, likely not understanding the term. Katsuki explained that it meant he didn't like girls but preferred boys. Izuku's face lit up with realization, and he smiled, admitting that he was gay too. Katsuki smiled back, telling Izuku it was time for bed. He kissed Izuku's nose, eliciting a giggle that made Katsuki's heart swell. Izuku declared his affection, and Katsuki pulled him closer, one hand on his back and the other in his hair, returning the sentiment. The next morning, Katsuki woke Izuku, mentioning a checkup and a surprise. He helped Izuku find some smaller clothes which were quite cute, a small top and black joggers. Katsuki looked at him curiously, but Izuku simply held his hand and his Eraserhead plushie, ready to go. They descended some stairs, as Izuku was apprehensive about the moving room, and entered a large space filled with people. A red-haired boy and a pink-haired girl approached them, hand in hand. The girl introduced herself as Mina and her boyfriend as Kirishima, complimenting Izuku's appearance. She radiated kindness, and Izuku sensed her friendly nature. Kirishima playfully warned Mina to calm down, while she continued to express her excitement. Izuku greeted them warmly, and Mina cooed over how adorable he was, expressing a longing to cuddle him. Katsuki, noticing Izuku's enjoyment, allowed the interaction. Izuku asked Mina if she wanted a hug, and her face lit up with joy. When she jumped into his arms, he effortlessly caught her, and they both laughed. Kirishima and Katsuki smiled at the scene, pleased that their friends were getting along. Izuku complimented Mina, calling her pretty, which made her blush and remark on how cute he was, adding that she understood why Katsuki liked him. Katsuki, flustered, pushed Mina playfully, while Izuku declared that he liked Katsuki too. They engaged in light conversation, but Izuku felt the urge to ask something that had been on his mind. Gathering his courage, he pointed to Mina's chest, curious about her physical appearance. Mina turned red, and Kirishima nearly choked on his drink. Katsuki explained that Izuku had only seen 2 men for the past 10 years and likely hadn't thought about such things before. Izuku worried he had said something inappropriate, asking if he had done something wrong. Mina reassured him that he hadn't, explaining that those were called 𝐼𝐼𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐻. Izuku nodded, still curious, and asked what they did. Mina explained that they produced milk for feeding babies, which led Izuku to wonder why he didn't have them. Kirishima clarified that only girls had them because only girls could give 𝐼𝐼𝐻𝐵. Izuku pondered this, but a wave of sadness washed over him as he worried about not being able to feed a baby if he ever had one, leading him to tears. Katsuki noticed and pulled Izuku onto his lap, stroking his hair gently while Izuku rested his head on his chest. Mina and Kirishima exchanged sympathetic glances, understanding the depth of Izuku's concern. It was reassuring to know there were other ways to provide for a baby. Izuku nodded, calming himself. In the stories Mama shared, parents had children with those they loved most. Did that mean he would have a baby with 𝐾𝐿? The thought filled him with warmth. 20 minutes later, 𝐾𝐿 led him to a room where Eraserhead and a small lady were present. They explained that she needed to check on his health. After several tests and a BLD sample, they confirmed he was perfectly healthy. As they walked down the hall, Eraserhead knocked on a door. Upon entering, they found Nizu at a desk, sipping tea. Izuku felt a rush of excitement. The smartest person he admired was right in front of him. He tugged on 𝐾𝐿's sleeve, unable to contain his enthusiasm. 𝐾𝐿 smiled, acknowledging his excitement. Nizu greeted Izuku warmly, expressing pleasure in meeting him. Izuku felt a thrill as he shared how he had looked up to Nizu since childhood, admiring his brilliance. Nizu responded, suggesting that Izuku could become his personal student, impressed by his potential since he was just 5 years old. Overwhelmed with joy, Izuku jumped up and down, exclaiming his eagerness. Nizu informed Aizawa and 𝐾𝐿 about Izuku's upcoming time at the school while everyone else attended classes, leading to his eventual participation in hero training. 𝐾𝐿 beamed with pride for him. Just then, Eraserhead mentioned that a visitor would arrive soon, piquing Izuku's curiosity. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Nizu invited the person in, and a woman with long green hair entered, smiling at Izuku. He instinctively hid behind Eraserhead, remembering the woman's past actions. Eraserhead noted Izuku's fear and urged the woman to keep her distance. 𝐾𝐿 attempted to reassure Izuku, explaining that the woman was his mother, Auntie 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Izuku shook his head, insisting that Mama was not there. Eraserhead continued, emphasizing that she had missed him all these years. The woman expressed her longing, but Izuku remained frightened, clinging tightly to Eraserhead. After a moment, the woman grew impatient, expressing her annoyance. Nizu questioned her attitude, and she dismissed Izuku's worth, revealing her disdain for him. 𝐾𝐿 was taken aback by her harsh words, reminding her of the love she once claimed to have for him. The woman laughed, revealing her true feelings, which angered Eraserhead. He confronted her, declaring that she would face consequences for her actions. As the police took the woman away, Izuku found comfort in 𝐾𝐿's embrace on the sofa in Nizu's office. He drifted into a peaceful sleep, dreaming of Big Brother and Mama, surrounded by love and joy. Weeks passed, and Izuku adjusted to life at 𝐼𝐻𝐿. He was still getting to know the other students but found joy in the company of Kirishima and Mina, who were kind to him. He enjoyed spending time with 𝐾𝐿's friends, especially Kaminari, whose humor reminded him of Big Brother. Despite Uraraka's attempts to befriend him, Izuku felt an instinctive distrust towards her. His days were filled with learning alongside Nizu, who praised his intelligence and focused on improving his speech. Nizu's understanding of Izuku's thoughts made him feel valued, as he navigated the challenges of communication. Today, Nizu announced that Izuku was ready to join Aizawa's hero class. Excitedly, Izuku jumped off the sofa, eager to share the news. Nizu climbed onto his shoulder, encouraging him as they approached the classroom door. Izuku felt a flutter of nerves but was reassured by Nizu's words. With a gentle knock, he entered the classroom, ready to embrace this new chapter in his life. When he entered the room, 𝐾𝐿 smiled at him, instantly calming him and prompting a smile in return. He gently placed 𝐒𝐮𝐬 on the floor in front of Aizawa, announcing that starting tomorrow, Izuku would be joining the hero course. Aizawa would continue teaching him most subjects since Izuku was at a much higher level than the others and would also assist him with speaking in full sentences. Once 𝐒𝐮𝐬 finished speaking, everyone was taken aback by Izuku's intelligence, especially after being absent for 10 years. Izuku looked at Aizawa, who suggested that he stay for the rest of the class to acclimate during the free period. He glanced at 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who smiled approvingly, and then nodded in agreement. Aizawa climbed into his sleeping bag, which looked amusing, while 𝐒𝐮𝐬 returned to his office, giving the class a stern look before leaving. 𝐾𝐿 approached Izuku and hugged him tightly, expressing excitement about training to become heroes together. Izuku smiled and laughed, feeling a rush of joy. Mina and Kirishima joined them, with Mina eagerly anticipating Izuku's animal quirk. He giggled and nodded, expressing admiration for Kirishima's power as well. The class reacted with "us" and laughter at Izuku's endearing demeanor. Kaminari complimented Izuku's impression of Kirishima, prompting him to jump off 𝐾𝐿 and run over to hug Kaminari, causing him to stumble back slightly. Izuku giggled, pulling Kaminari's sleeve to lead him back to the group, where Mina and Kirishima were still giggling. 𝐾𝐿, however, appeared displeased and pulled Izuku back onto his lap, whispering that he shouldn't get too excited about someone else when he was right there. Izuku blushed and nodded, feeling 𝐾𝐿's protective nature was comforting. As the class neared its end, 𝗟𝗟 approached their group, causing a hush to fall over the room as everyone anticipated Izuku's reaction. She hesitantly asked if she could speak with him, to which he wrapped his arm around 𝐾𝐿's neck for reassurance. 𝗟𝗟 expressed that she thought Izuku was really cool and strong, and she wondered if he would go on a date with her. 𝐾𝐿's grip tightened at her words, and the class turned their attention to Izuku for his response. Not one to hide his feelings, he simply stated that he liked 𝐾𝐿, prompting gasps from the class and smiles from his friends. 𝐾𝐿 let out a breath of relief and hugged Izuku tighter. 𝗟𝗟, undeterred, asked if she could at least have a chance, which elicited a growl from 𝐾𝐿. Izuku stroked 𝐾𝐿's hair, affirming that he was amazing, and then pointed at 𝗟𝗟, calling her mean in a low voice. Laughter erupted in the classroom as Izuku declared his orientation, playfully stating that if he were to date a girl, it would be Mina. 𝐾𝐿 stood up, wrapping his arms around Izuku and asserting that he was his, leaving the classroom with Izuku blushing furiously. Once in the dorm room, 𝐾𝐿 placed Izuku on his bed and knelt in front of him, looking him in the eye. He confessed that he had been hesitant to overwhelm Izuku but wanted to know if he would go on a date with him. Izuku, shocked and happy, jumped on 𝐾𝐿, causing them to tumble onto the floor. Giggling, he agreed to the date, and 𝐾𝐿 smiled, saying they would go out on the weekend. He kissed Izuku's nose, and Izuku couldn't believe he was going on a date with 𝐾𝐿. Meanwhile, in Class 1A, everyone was in shock that Katsuki Bakugo had openly claimed Izuku for himself. They were also amused to see 𝗟𝗟 storm out of the classroom, red with anger and muttering under her breath. On Saturday, 𝐾𝐿 was excited about the date he had planned for Izuku. He dressed in black ripped jeans and a red tank top, knowing they wouldn't be in a crowded place since Izuku disliked large crowds. When he was ready, he heard a knock on his door. Dunce face and shitty hair entered, smiling at him. 𝐾𝐿, in his usual irritated tone, asked what they wanted. They wished him luck on his date, but he brushed it off, confident that Izuku would love what he had planned. As he left his room to get Izuku, he felt a strange mix of emotions about Izuku being close to others, but he pushed those thoughts aside. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on Izuku's door. When it opened, it felt like time stood still. Izuku was wearing a red cropped jumper and black shorts, his hair clipped back, showcasing his freckles and bright eyes. He felt a slight blush on his cheeks as he smiled at his companion. The other person commented on how amazing they looked, slipping their hand into his smaller one, which felt soft and warm. After locking the door, he returned the smile, complimenting them in turn. The honesty was refreshing, and it made him appreciate their connection even more. As they prepared to leave, he nodded and wrapped his other hand around the other's bicep, enjoying the closeness. Passing through the common room, they received smiles and waves from others, with Izuku cheerfully returning the gesture. However, a certain individual made a disparaging remark, suggesting that 𝐾𝐭𝐲 would betray him. Before he could respond, his friend defended him fiercely, stating that 𝐾𝐭𝐲 genuinely cared about him and had put effort into planning their date. He was taken aback by the unexpected support and resolved to express his gratitude later. Nodding at his friend, he exited with Izuku, hearing the disgruntled individual storm off. Izuku, eyes sparkling with curiosity, asked where they were headed. The response was a playful tease about a surprise, which made Izuku pout adorably. He guided Izuku to a hill in the woods, instructing him to close his eyes to avoid tripping. Each time Izuku thought he might stumble, he would yelp and cling tighter, which was endearing. Upon reaching the top, Izuku opened his eyes and bounced with excitement at the sight of a large cherry tree. A blanket had been laid out, adorned with pancakes, strawberries, and a mini chocolate fountain. Izuku expressed his gratitude with hugs, and they settled down to enjoy the meal together. They chatted about their aspirations to become heroes, with him sharing his ambition to surpass All Might, which Izuku wholeheartedly believed he could achieve. Izuku expressed his longing to be an underground hero like Izawa, and he listened intently as Izuku spoke fondly of his family. It warmed his heart to see Izuku so happy. As Izuku got messy with the food, he helped feed him strawberries, delighting in Izuku's joy with each bite. When he asked if they were ready for their next stop, Izuku looked confused, thinking it was the end. He chuckled, assuring him that the day was far from over. They packed up and left the picnic area, arranging for their friend to pick up the leftovers. The next destination was the mall. Izuku appeared a bit nervous, but he reassured him by holding his waist, eliciting a smile from Izuku as he leaned against him. They discovered a small art supply store, and Izuku's face lit up with happiness. Upon entering, he encouraged Izuku to choose whatever he wanted, which left Izuku in shock before he hugged him tightly in gratitude. After Izuku selected canvases, brushes, and paints, they headed to a secluded beach area overlooking the ocean. He thought it would be the perfect place for Izuku to paint, a peaceful spot where they wouldn't be disturbed. Izuku looked up at him with tears of joy in his eyes, prompting him to pull him into a comforting embrace and kiss the top of his head. Izuku expressed his happiness, calling him perfect, and he wiped away Izuku's tears, reassuring him that he deserved all the happiness in the world. The rest of the day was spent watching Izuku paint, and during breaks, they cuddled together, enjoying the sunset. As they made their way back to the dorms, Izuku couldn't help but admire him, thinking about how attractive he was. When he looked down and asked what Izuku was staring at, Izuku shyly admitted his feelings, which made him smirk and blush slightly. Izuku then expressed a longing for a kiss, and when he stopped to turn towards him, Izuku nodded, feeling his cheeks warm. Just as they were about to share the moment, a noise startled Izuku, causing him to jump into his arms, which he caught effortlessly. They decided it was best to head back, and Izuku nodded against his neck, smiling as he was carried back to the dorm. Upon arrival, they found a few friends still awake, who eagerly inquired about their day. Izuku shared that it had been fun, and 𝐾𝐿, with a hint of reluctance, thanked their friend for helping with the day's plans. After some light conversation, they bid each other good night and headed to their respective dorms. At 𝐾𝐿's door, Izuku gently pulled his hand, nervously asking if he could stay. He smiled and nodded. 𝐾𝐿 lent a white shirt and some shorts while he changed into a black shirt. After entering the bathroom to change, he set his hairpins down on the counter. Emerging from the bathroom, he found 𝐾𝐿 sitting on his bed, engrossed in his phone. He ran and jumped onto the bed beside him, prompting 𝐾𝐿 to smile and put his phone down. 𝐾𝐿 mentioned that he would be taking him on dates from now on, and he smiled, cuddling up to him. 𝐾𝐿's pleasant scent made him happy, and 𝐾𝐿 laughed, stroking his hair, remarking that it was good not to smell bad. He felt grateful that 𝐾𝐿 had feelings for him, though he still wanted a kiss but was unsure how it worked. He tapped 𝐾𝐿's chest to get his attention. 𝐾𝐿 asked what was wrong, and he nearly melted at the affectionate nickname. Climbing onto 𝐾𝐿's lap, he faced him as 𝐾𝐿 cupped his cheeks, looking into his eyes. He felt his cheeks warm at the compliment of being appealing. Leaning into 𝐾𝐿's touch, he rested his hands on 𝐾𝐿's. When he opened his eyes, he noticed 𝐾𝐿 gazing at his lips. Unconsciously, he liked his lips in anticipation, admiring 𝐾𝐿's full, pink lips. 𝐾𝐿 leaned in, gently connecting their lips. He followed 𝐾𝐿's lead, unsure of what to do. 𝐾𝐿's movements became more involved, and he felt a rush of excitement but soon found it difficult to breathe. Pulling away for a moment, he breathed and asked if that was how a kiss worked. 𝐾𝐿 nodded, biting his lip, and encouraged him to try again. 𝐾𝐿 smirked as he pulled his face closer, and he rested his arms on 𝐾𝐿's shoulders while they kissed. When 𝐾𝐿 pulled away, he let out a small whine, prompting 𝐾𝐿 to ask if he wanted to try something else that would feel good. Eagerly, he nodded, wanting to know what 𝐾𝐿 had in mind. 𝐾𝐿 instructed him to open his mouth and stick out his tongue a little, which he did, resting his tongue on his bottom lip. 𝐾𝐿 liked his tongue slowly, then began to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 on it. The sensation was delightful, but he craved another kiss. He pushed his tongue into 𝐾𝐿's mouth, twirling it around as they continued to kiss. He enjoyed the feeling of kissing. After about 10 minutes, they pulled away, a thin strand of saliva connecting them. Resting his head on 𝐾𝐿's shoulder, he hugged his neck and expressed his affection for 𝐾𝐿 and kissing. 𝐾𝐿 chuckled and returned the sentiment, calling him an amazing kisser. They remained in that comfortable position for a while, catching their breath until 𝐾𝐿 suggested they get some sleep and hang out with their friends the next day. He hummed in agreement and lay down on 𝐾𝐿's bed. 𝐾𝐿 lay beside him, pulling him close. 𝐾𝐿 wished him good night, and he replied before feeling a gentle kiss on his neck, which lulled him into a peaceful slumber. He awoke from a dream about Mama and Big Brother, feeling a wave of sadness at their absence. Looking around for 𝐾𝐿, he realized he was alone. Spotting a note on the bed, he read it. "Good morning, 𝐒𝐮𝐬. I went shopping with shitty hair. I should be back before you wake up. If not, I'll see you when I get back. Your 𝐾𝐿." Checking the time, he noted it was 8:30 a.m., much earlier than his usual weekend wake-up time of 9:25 a.m., likely due to the dream. Quickly getting dressed, he ran to 𝐾𝐿's room and knocked on the door, not realizing tears were streaming down his face. 𝐾𝐿 opened the door, gasping at the sight of him. He rushed in and hugged 𝐾𝐿 tightly, sobbing into his chest. 𝐾𝐿 comforted him, inviting him inside. Sitting on the bed, 𝐾𝐿 wrapped an arm around his shoulder and asked if he wanted to talk about it. He sniffled and rested his head on 𝐾𝐿's shoulder, expressing how much he missed Mama and Big Brother. 𝐾𝐿 gently reminded him that they wouldn't want him to be sad. He then asked if he could borrow a jumper, looking up at 𝐾𝐿. With a smile, 𝐾𝐿 encouraged him to help himself. Excitedly, he dashed to the dresser, opening the top drawer. 𝐾𝐿 shouted for him to wait, rushing to stop him, but it was too late. He discovered cute pink dresses and skirts, along with some 𝐶RP tops. 𝐾𝐿 appeared distressed, and he understood that these clothes were typically worn by girls, but he had always wanted to try a dress. He just hadn't known how to express it. Not wanting 𝐾𝐿 to worry, he pulled out a matching outfit and chose a blue one for himself, handing the pink one to 𝐾𝐿, who reluctantly put it on. They stood before the large mirror, and he twirled, prompting 𝐾𝐿 to do the same. They giggled, and he held 𝐾𝐿's arm, admiring their reflections. He declared them pretty while resting his head on 𝐾𝐿's shoulder. 𝐾𝐿 looked at him through the mirror, questioning if he thought it was weird. He shook his head, assuring him that it felt good and they looked pretty. 𝐾𝐿 smiled and nodded, and an idea struck him. He suggested they do makeup, and 𝐾𝐿, a little hesitant, retrieved a bag from his drawer. He explained that he sometimes did his makeup and offered to teach him. Eagerly, he nodded, jumping with excitement. 𝐾𝐿 giggled and emptied the bag onto his bed, motioning for him to sit on the floor with him. He began explaining the various makeup tools, and just then he received a text from 𝐾𝐿 asking where he was. He replied that he was with 𝐾𝐿 and would let him know when they were ready for him and 𝐾𝐿 to join them. They had applied some blush and mascara, along with a shiny pink lip gloss. Both felt pretty and confident. Izuku asked Katsuki to bring Kirishima to the room so they could hang out and enjoy a boys' night. While waiting, Izuku posed a question he had been eager to ask. He wondered if 𝐾𝐿 liked boys. 𝐾𝐿 looked shocked and turned bright red, glancing down at the floor. He admitted that he thought so, explaining that when he was around a certain boy, he felt giddy and happy, but that boy was straight and had a girlfriend. Izuku guessed it was Kirishima, and 𝐾𝐿 flinched slightly before nodding. He shared how amazing and nice Kirishima was and how he wished for more than friendship but didn't want to ruin Kirishima's relationship with Mina. Izuku smiled and reassured Kami that he wouldn't tell anyone. Kami laughed, knowing Izuku would keep his secret. A knock at the door startled them, and Izuku noticed Kami was nervous, so he held his hand and smiled reassuringly. After a deep breath, Kami called for them to come in. The boys entered and froze when they saw them. Izuku stepped forward excitedly, jumping when he saw Katsuki. He exclaimed that he looked pretty, causing Katsuki to blush dark red and smile slightly. Kirishima commented on how cute they looked, and Izuku giggled while pulling Kami closer. Izuku mentioned that Kami had done his makeup, and Katsuki remarked that it was about time Kami wore what he liked instead of what he thought others would prefer. Kami was surprised to learn that Katsuki had noticed. Kirishima chimed in, recalling how Kami would always look at dresses and skirts while shopping. After the initial awkwardness faded, they all enjoyed movies and games together. When they went downstairs for food, everyone was blushing and complimenting Kami and Izuku. Kami felt more comfortable now that everyone was accepting. Izuku noticed Kirishima watching Kami closely and wondered if there was a chance Kirishima liked him back. He planned to ask later when they left Kami's room. As it got late, they prepared to leave, and Kami offered Izuku the outfit so they could have matching clothes. Excited, Izuku grabbed Katsuki and Kirishima's arms, leading them to his room. He playfully pushed them onto the bed and stood in front of them with his arms crossed. Katsuki asked what was going on, and Izuku turned to Kirishima, who looked a bit nervous. He asked if Kirishima liked Kami. Kirishima was taken aback and glanced at Katsuki, who was equally surprised. Kirishima admitted he didn't know, explaining that he had never liked a boy before but found Kami cute and valued their friendship. He mentioned overhearing their conversation outside the door, where Kami had expressed feelings for him. Katsuki encouraged Kirishima to act on his feelings, assuring him that Mina would understand. Kirishima hesitated, revealing that he was in a fake relationship with Mina to make someone else jealous. Katsuki playfully hit Kirishima on the back of the head, expressing frustration at the situation. Kirishima questioned how he could know if he could be with a boy romantically. Katsuki suggested he should kiss a guy to find out. Kirishima protested, saying he couldn't just kiss a random guy. Izuku then proposed that Kirishima kiss Katsuki, which shocked both boys. Katsuki was the first to regain his composure, questioning Izuku's suggestion. Izuku clarified that he meant they were friends and should be comfortable with each other. Kirishima remained uncertain, but Katsuki, after some thought, agreed if it would help clarify Kirishima's feelings. Izuku smiled and happily sat on Katsuki's lap, pleased with the agreement. Kirishima contemplated the situation, asking if it would be okay to kiss Katsuki. Katsuki assured him it was fine since they were friends. Kirishima decided he wanted to wait until the following weekend to mentally prepare. Izuku and Katsuki nodded in agreement. After Kirishima left, Katsuki smirked at Izuku, suggesting that he would eventually be Izuku's boyfriend. Izuku smiled and nodded, expressing his longing for Katsuki to be his boyfriend too. Katsuki leaned in close, whispering sweetly to Izuku. He placed a gentle kiss on Izuku's lips and suggested they get some sleep. Izuku nodded and changed into his pajamas before climbing into bed with Katsuki, quickly falling asleep while listening to Katsuki's heartbeat. The following week flew by. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 continued to help Izuku improve his speech, and he was making significant progress. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 discovered that Izuku's quirk affected his speaking abilities, explaining that his jaw and bone structure were different, making it easier for him to transform into animals. Izuku felt proud of his improvements and enjoyed his time with 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Kirishima decided he would kiss Katsuki, but not in the dorms, as he felt uncomfortable. Izuku and Katsuki had a date planned for the next day, and Kirishima would meet them after dinner to go somewhere more comfortable for him. Izuku knew some might find his suggestion strange, but he understood Kirishima's confusion and recognized their strong friendship. Time passed quickly, and Izuku woke Katsuki by jumping on his bed. Katsuki groaned and playfully pulled Izuku down on top of him. Izuku pouted, calling Katsuki mean, but Katsuki just laughed and kissed him before getting up to prepare for their date. Katsuki dressed in ripped black jeans and a dark blue sweater, ready for the day ahead. She wore a light green lace dress and gold sandals. 𝐾𝐿 embraced her from behind, resting his head on top of hers and complimenting her beauty. She giggled and turned to face him, returning the compliment with a peck on his cheek as she took his hand. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, they encountered 𝐾𝐿, who remarked on how pretty she looked and asked if she was going on a date. She nodded and smiled, bidding farewell to him as she and 𝐾𝐿 headed to a nearby park they used to visit as children. 𝐾𝐿 mentioned that no one came there anymore. They sat on a bench, chatting until she persuaded 𝐾𝐿 to push her on the swings, something she hadn't done since childhood. After some time, they strolled around the area, grabbing a quick bite to eat. 𝐾𝐿 mentioned that 𝐼𝐻𝐬 should be arriving soon, suggesting they return to the park. She acknowledged him while munching on her food. Upon returning to the park, they found 𝐼𝐻𝐬 waiting on a bench. When he spotted them, he jumped up with a smile. She ran over and hugged him, asking if he was ready. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 glanced at 𝐾𝐿 and then back at her, affirming that he was comfortable with both of them, as they were his best friends. She nodded and sat on a small brick wall behind her, while 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 stood a few feet in front of her. 𝐾𝐿, with a serious tone, told 𝐼𝐻𝐬 to let him know if he changed his mind. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 assured him he understood. 𝐾𝐿 leaned in, kissing 𝐼𝐻𝐬 briefly before pulling away. She playfully asked if that was all, to which 𝐾𝐿 replied that he had kissed him just as they discussed. She hopped off the wall and approached 𝐾𝐿, requesting a kiss. They both looked surprised, but 𝐾𝐿 leaned down to kiss her, wrapping his arms around her waist while she tangled her fingers in his hair. Their kiss was passionate, and when she pulled away, she noticed 𝐼𝐻𝐬 blushing. She encouraged 𝐾𝐿 to kiss 𝐼𝐻𝐬 next. 𝐾𝐿 nodded, and she returned to her spot on the wall. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 hesitantly asked if he was okay with this, to which she giggled and waved her hand for them to proceed. 𝐾𝐿 placed one hand on 𝐼𝐻𝐬's waist and the other on his cheek, pressing their lips together. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 initially tensed but soon relaxed, and they began to share a gentle kiss. She watched intently as 𝐾𝐿 playfully licked 𝐼𝐻𝐬's lip before deepening the kiss. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 wrapped his arms around 𝐾𝐿's neck, pulling him closer, and she couldn't help but feel a thrill watching the two of them. She giggled as they pulled apart slowly, moving closer to them. 𝐾𝐿 asked 𝐼𝐻𝐬 if he enjoyed the kiss, pulling her close. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 stammered that it was nice, and she noticed some moisture on his lip. An idea struck her, and she leaned in to lick his lip teasingly, commenting on how good it tasted. 𝐻𝐬 blushed deeply, and 𝐾𝐿 playfully slapped her back, calling her a little minx. She suggested they head home, mentioning that 𝐻𝐬 could meet up with 𝐾𝐿, giving 𝐻𝐬 a wink as he blushed and continued walking. Meanwhile, 𝗟𝗏 had been watching from behind a bush, having captured evidence of 𝐾𝐿 and Kirishima kissing. She plotted to reveal it at the right moment to win Midoriya's affection. Time passed, and it had been a month since she arrived at 𝐼𝐻𝐬. She had been training with 𝐼𝐻𝐬, eager to learn how to fight both with and without her quirk. She had grown close to 𝐻𝐬, sharing stories about her family and how much she missed them. He informed her that her family had gradually stopped their criminal activities after her kidnapping, which brought her relief. 𝐾𝐿 and she had been enjoying little dates and spending time with 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝐾𝐿, forming a tight-knit group. 𝐾𝐿 was more relaxed around them, and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 had stopped pretending to date Mina, instead flirting with 𝐾𝐿, who remained oblivious. She decided it was time to ask 𝐾𝐿 to be her official boyfriend, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. She planned to do it on the roof during lunch when they would be alone. As lunchtime arrived, she sat on the roof with 𝐾𝐿, trying to calm her racing heart. He noticed her unease and gently rubbed her hand, always knowing how to soothe her. Gathering her courage, she finally blurted out her question, asking if he would be her boyfriend. His eyes widened in surprise, and once he processed her words, he broke into a smile and jumped up, pulling her with him. He enthusiastically agreed, lifting her into a joyful hug as she giggled. Relieved, she kissed him and gazed into his appealing eyes. 𝐾𝐿 then sweetly kissed her nose, declaring his love for her. She froze for a moment, overwhelmed by his words, and tears of happiness streamed down her face as she embraced him tightly, reciprocating his feelings. They shared a tender moment, with her expressing how much she missed her family but felt so happy with him. 𝐾𝐿 held her closer, whispering a heartfelt plea for her to stay with him forever. She promised that she would, and their kiss this time was soft and filled with love. When they finally pulled away, they both wore smiles, feeling as if they were floating on air. She hugged his waist, marveling at their connection, and he affirmed that they belonged to each other. "I can't believe this is really happening." 𝐾𝐿 suggested they finish eating before they starved, pulling me to sit on his lap. I smiled and wrapped my arm around his neck, giving him my best puppy dog eyes. He rolled his eyes playfully, saying I was lucky he loved me, as anyone else would be on the floor for saying that. He offered me a bite of my food, and I smiled lovingly at him. I replied that I loved him too, taking another bite. 𝐾𝐿 kissed my lips while I was still eating, making me giggle. He smiled back and continued eating while feeding me. I could already tell he was going to be the best boyfriend ever. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 was feeling anxious, leaning against the wall behind the school, fiddling with the hem of his sleeve to calm his shaking. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Kirishima approaching with a flushed face. Kirishima looked nervous as he scratched the back of his neck, admitting that he liked 𝐼𝐻𝐬 a lot and wanted to know if he would be his boyfriend. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 stood there, processing the unexpected confession from his crush. His face turned bright red as he realized what had just happened. When he noticed Kirishima looking worried, he jumped and hugged him tightly, saying he would be his boyfriend. They both smiled, relieved and excited. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 couldn't wait to share the news with Izuku, but Kirishima teased him about giving his new boyfriend a kiss. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 blushed as Kirishima pulled him closer, seeking permission with a gaze. Nodding quickly, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 felt his heart race as they shared a kiss, which was everything he had hoped for. They pulled away, both red-faced and grinning. Meanwhile, Izuku and 𝐾𝐿 were cuddling in Izuku's room, enjoying some time together after school. A knock at the door interrupted them, and 𝐾𝐿 groaned while Izuku giggled and playfully booped his nose, urging him to be nice. 𝐾𝐿 opened the door with a grumpy expression, surprised to see Kirishima and 𝐼𝐻𝐬. Izuku jumped up to hug them, inviting them to sit on the bed. As they settled in, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 excitedly announced that Kirishima was his boyfriend. Izuku gasped and hugged 𝐼𝐻𝐬, thrilled for them. 𝐾𝐿 congratulated Kirishima with a quick hug and a fist bump. Izuku, unable to contain his curiosity, asked if they had kissed, causing both boys to blush. When Izuku playfully asked who was the better kisser, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 looked shocked while Kirishima stumbled over his words. Izuku shared how he had encouraged them to kiss, and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 expressed a longing to see it. 𝐾𝐿 and Kirishima exchanged confused glances, unsure why anyone would want to witness their boyfriends kissing. Izuku teased that it was exciting, sliding his hand over 𝐾𝐿's chest. Kiri and 𝐾𝐿 were baffled, trying to understand the appeal. Suddenly, Izuku had a brilliant idea. He moved to sit in 𝐼𝐻𝐬's lap, drawing the attention of the other boys. He leaned in closer to 𝐼𝐻𝐬, teasingly suggesting they kiss right in front of them. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 caught on and leaned closer, igniting the boys' imaginations. They watched as 𝐾𝐿 and Kirishima turned bright red, clearly intrigued and frustrated by the scene unfolding before them. 𝐾𝐿 and Kirishima urged them to just go for it, and Izuku and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 exchanged victorious smiles, ready to give them a show. Izuku shifted so he was straddling 𝐼𝐻𝐬, checking to ensure he was comfortable. With a grin, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 agreed, and they leaned in for a slow, gentle kiss. As they kissed, they could hear 𝐾𝐿 and Kirishima breathing heavily. Pulling away, Izuku whispered to 𝐼𝐻𝐬, wondering if their boyfriends had learned their lesson. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 chuckled, suggesting they should give them more. They kissed again, deepening the connection, and 𝐼𝐻𝐬's hands found their way to Izuku's waist. The kiss ignited a spark, and they both felt exhilarated as they pulled away, grinning proudly at each other. 𝐾𝐿, unable to hide his reaction, exclaimed in surprise, while Kirishima tried to cover his embarrassment. Izuku and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 laughed, enjoying the playful moment as they basked in the excitement of their relationships. That was enjoyable, and 𝐾𝐿 was an excellent kisser. A smile spread across my face as I giggled a little. 𝐾𝐿 returned the smile, complimenting my skills as well. I playfully mentioned that 𝐾𝐿 had taught me a thing or two, which made him smirk with pride. Laughter filled the air as we continued to hang out, teasing one another and playing video games. It was a great day, and I felt grateful for our friendship. Time passed, and today was the day for hero training. I was finally going to use my quirk, something no one had seen yet, and I was filled with excitement. Upon arriving at the training field, 𝐼𝐬𝐽 and All Might were waiting for us. I rushed over to 𝐼𝐬𝐽 and hugged him, having missed him while I was busy with 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and 𝐾𝐿. He told me to wait with 𝗏𝗏𝐽, and I nodded, returning to 𝐾𝐿 and holding his hand. We were set for one-on-one matches, and I was paired with Todoroki, who I suspected had 2 quirks. Before my match, 𝐾𝐿 faced 𝗟𝗏, who attempted to make him float, but he managed to knock her out. When he returned, I congratulated him with a quick kiss, and he seemed pleased that everyone witnessed our moment, solidifying our bond. While waiting for my turn, we chatted with Cammy and Kiri, with 𝐾𝐿 holding my waist and Kiri doing the same with Cammy. We exchanged smiles, aware of how protective they were of us. When my name was called, I giggled at the nickname 𝐼𝐬𝐽 had given me and stepped onto the stage. 𝐾𝐿 gave me an encouraging thumbs up. As All Might yelled to start, Todoroki launched a large slab of ice at me. I quickly jumped aside, and in an instant, I transformed into a magnificent white lion. The crowd gasped in surprise, and I caught 𝐾𝐿's delighted expression before focusing back on the match. I growled at Todoroki, who retaliated with an even larger slab of ice. Using the strength of a gorilla and a bear, I smashed through the ice, sending shards flying back at him. As he attempted to shield himself, I seized his clothing in my mouth and swung him out of bounds. Transforming back into my human form, I dashed toward 𝐾𝐿, exclaiming my victory. He lifted me up with a smile, praising my performance. I returned his affection with a kiss on his cheek, causing him to blush adorably. Everything felt perfect, though I couldn't help but miss my family. From 𝐼𝐬𝐽's perspective, he was puzzled by the sudden decision of the League of Villains to surrender and reveal their location. He listened intently as Tsukachi explained the plan, which involved him going in first to cancel the Warp Gate's quirk, followed by the others to apprehend Shigaraki and his 𝐒𝐮𝐲. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 hoped there wouldn't be a trap or a way to take Izuku back. He had grown close to him and cared deeply for him. Knowing that Izuku and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 were dating brought him some comfort. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 found himself outside a dilapidated building believed to be the League of Villains base. He knocked on the door, preparing to use his quirk, when it slowly creaked open. There stood Tamura Shigaraki, wearing a quirk cancellation bracelet, inviting them inside with a raspy voice. Cautiously, 𝐼𝐬𝐽 entered, followed by All Might, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, Hawks, and several other heroes and officers. He demanded to know why they had released Izuku and why they had chosen to surrender now. The villains explained that they hadn't intended to take Izuku but had grown fond of him, recognizing his innocence and purity. They admitted to feeling guilty for taking away his freedom and expressed a longing to atone for their actions, even wishing to support Izuku as an underground hero in the future. Shigaraki revealed his affection for Izuku, referring to him as his little brother, and shared the pain of their past actions. He pointed out the room where they had kept Izuku, filled with his paintings and stuffed animals. As the 2 men were skirted away, All Might inquired about 𝗟𝗏𝗏. Shigaraki informed them that he had abandoned his villainous ways to start anew, and although Izuku had never met him, they all cared for him, even 𝗟𝗏𝗏. When the heroes turned on the lights in Izuku's former room, they were taken aback by the walls adorned with hero memorabilia. Hawks exclaimed in surprise upon discovering a painting of himself, while 𝗏𝗏𝗏 traced his fingers along a life-sized portrait. All Might, however, lamented the absence of his own likeness, prompting a smirk from 𝗏𝗏𝗏. After gathering Izuku's belongings, they returned to you. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 was followed by All Might, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, and Hawks, all eager to speak with Izuku. He was summoned to 𝐼𝐬𝐽's office, and now all 𝐼𝐬𝐽 could do was wait, contemplating whether to inform him about his family. From Izuku's perspective, he and 𝐾𝐿 were lying on his bed, caught up in a passionate moment. Just as things were heating up, he was called to 𝐼𝐬𝐽's office. 𝐾𝐿 grumbled as he climbed off, telling Izuku to calm down and promising they could continue later. Izuku grinned while fixing his hair, and 𝐾𝐿 insisted on accompanying him, wanting to confront 𝐼𝐬𝐽 for the interruption. As 𝐾𝐿 playfully smacked his rear, Izuku pushed his shoulder, trying to suppress a blush. He couldn't help but admire how appealing his partner looked, playfully nibbling at his neck, which made him giggle. Pulling away, he took his partner's hand and suggested they see what 𝐼𝐬𝐽 wanted before having some fun. His partner rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, clearly annoyed. As they approached 𝐼𝐬𝐽's door, 𝐾𝐿 burst in, visibly angry, demanding to know what 𝐼𝐬𝐽 wanted. He sighed and followed him inside. Upon entering, he noticed 𝗟𝗏 and 𝐻𝐿𝐬 standing by 𝐼𝐬𝐽's desk, causing him to blush deeply at the sight of his favorite heroes. The excitement bubbled within him as he exclaimed how thrilled he was to see them. 𝐻𝐿𝐬 approached him with enthusiasm, complimenting his drawing. He could hardly believe that his favorite hero liked his work and eagerly asked if he could touch 𝐻𝐿𝐬's wings. 𝐻𝐿𝐬 happily agreed and even offered to sign the painting. The soft texture of the wings thrilled him, and he couldn't contain his excitement. 𝗟𝗏, on the other hand, seemed less impressed, looking away as he commented on the paintings. He playfully teased 𝗟𝗏 about his attitude, which made 𝐾𝐿 blush in response to the banter. 𝐼𝐬𝐽, sensing the tension, awkwardly shifted the conversation to a more serious topic regarding his family. His heart raced at the mention of his mother and brother, fearing for their safety. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 revealed that they had given themselves up, leaving him in shock. Tears began to well up as he questioned why they would do such a thing. 𝐾𝐿 wrapped his arms around him from behind, offering comfort as 𝐼𝐬𝐽 explained that they had made the sacrifice to ensure nothing would hinder his path to becoming a hero. The uncertainty of their fate weighed heavily on him, and he leaned into 𝐾𝐿 for support. Just then, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 appeared unexpectedly, suggesting a chance for his family to attend 𝗟𝗏 for rehabilitation. Overwhelmed with joy, he couldn't believe there was hope to see them again. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 confirmed that they would not fail them again, and he rushed to hug him in gratitude. Returning to 𝐾𝐿's side, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 then surprised him with the news that he would be adopting him, leaving him speechless. The thought of having 𝐼𝐬𝐽 as a father filled him with happiness, and he expressed his gratitude with a heartfelt hug. 𝐼𝐬𝐽, though surprised, welcomed the idea, and he felt a sense of belonging. Once they were excused to handle the necessary paperwork, he pulled 𝐾𝐿 into a warm embrace, sharing his feelings about how perfect everything had become. With an amazing boyfriend, caring friends, and the prospect of family reunification, he felt overwhelmed with joy. 𝐾𝐿 reassured him that nothing would harm him as long as he was around, expressing his love with a gentle touch. Feeling a rush of affection, he leaned in for a kiss that started sweet and gentle but gradually became more passionate. 𝐾𝐿 held him close, and he felt ready to take their relationship to the next level. He expressed his longing to be completely with 𝐾𝐿, who blushed at the suggestion but was supportive and willing to wait. He assured 𝐾𝐿 that he was ready, and they shared a tender kiss as 𝐾𝐿 lifted him and led him to the bed, where he hovered over him, confirming his beauty and ensuring he was certain about his decision. With a smile, he nodded, feeling that this was everything he had ever wanted. The next morning, he woke up next to 𝐾𝐿, smiling at how fortunate he felt. He lay there, studying 𝐾𝐿's handsome face, grateful for their bond. As she traced his features with her fingers, she ran them over his cheek and jawline until she reached his lips, which were soft and inviting. She giggled, thinking that if he wanted a kiss, he could have simply asked. He opened his eyes and pretended to be hurt, remarking that after the previous night, she would be nicer to him, especially since she had been calling his name so loudly. A blush crept onto her cheeks, and she hid her face in his chest, mumbling that it had felt really good. He chuckled, clearly having hurt her. He gently lifted her chin, making her look up at him, and said he was glad it had been good for her too. He brought their faces closer until they were just inches apart. She closed the distance, kissing him softly, but when he playfully liked her bottom lip, she kept her mouth closed. He growled in mock annoyance, grabbing her waist, which made her gasp. Seizing the moment, he playfully pushed his tongue into her mouth. After a moment, she pulled away, biting his lower lip and teasingly claiming he was too much. She got up to choose an outfit, remembering one that matched the colors of his hero costume. She asked him to close his eyes, and though he looked confused, he complied. Once she was dressed and feeling cute, she stood next to the bed for him to see her. When he turned around, he smirked, taking in her appearance as he sat up. It felt wonderful to be admired like this. He pulled her closer, standing between his legs, and she rested her hands on his shoulders. As he slid his hands from her waist to her thighs, she felt a mix of excitement and embarrassment. Suddenly, he stood up, gripping her thighs and wrapping them around his waist. She instinctively held onto his shoulders to keep from falling. He laughed, teasing her for not warning him, and she playfully hit his chest, pouting. He apologized with a quick kiss, and she nestled her head into his neck, feeling like a kitten as he affectionately petted her head. After a moment, she got off him, smiling as she asked what they should do that day. He thought for a moment before suggesting they buy snacks and invite their friends for a movie day. She agreed enthusiastically, texting their friends to gather in the common room. Everyone was on board, and soon they set off to the store, looking forward to a relaxing day. At the store, they split up to gather snacks more efficiently. She went with one friend while he paired up with another. She casually mentioned that she and he had spent the night together, waiting for a reaction. Her friend looked confused, pointing out that they always slept together. She clarified, emphasizing the word, slept, and watched as her friend turned bright red. To her surprise, her friend revealed that he had also spent the night with his partner. They both gasped in disbelief, realizing they had shared the same experience. They laughed at the coincidence and excitedly discussed the idea of a double date. They playfully planned a double wedding, imagining their outfits and laughing at the thought. As they continued shopping, he watched as his friend excitedly dragged another friend away, thinking they looked adorable. When asked what he was smiling about, he simply replied that they looked cute. His friend agreed, and they chatted about their relationships. He smirked, recalling the previous night, and shared that things were going well. His friend mentioned being worried about hurting his partner, but he laughed, knowing that the sounds of enjoyment indicated otherwise. They continued shopping, discussing their experiences and enjoying the light-hearted banter. They came across some Pocky sticks and decided to grab a few for a fun game later. When they regrouped, the excitement for a double date was palpable, and they quickly agreed to the plan, sharing smiles and laughter as they headed back to the dorms. They spent the afternoon hanging out together, talking about everything and nothing, enjoying each other's company. As lunchtime approached, they decided to include another friend in their plans, looking forward to more fun ahead. Since everyone started dating, we hadn't spent much time together. Mina and 𝐼𝐻𝐻 began their relationship shortly after she and Kirishima claimed they weren't a couple. We were in Mina's room, enjoying music while she and Cammy chatted on the bed. I was rummaging through her closet for a dress to borrow. I discovered a charming baby blue sundress and quickly put it on, feeling comfortable changing in front of them since Mina didn't mind. If Cammy happened to glance, I would simply enjoy the attention and maybe tease him a bit. Once I was dressed, I admired myself in the mirror and noticed Cammy's gaze on me. I smirked playfully, bending down slightly to pick up a lipstick I had spotted on the floor. When I glanced back, I saw Cammy's face flushed. I began to dance to the rhythm of the music, swaying my hips and running my hands along my sides and through my hair. Mina complimented my dancing, and I smiled back at her. I then shifted my attention to Cammy, inviting him to dance with me. He hesitated but eventually took my hand, and I pulled him closer, guiding his arms around my waist. As we swayed together, Mina asked if she could record us. I turned my back to Cammy, leaning against him while he kept his hands around me. I playfully suggested that she send the video to 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐿, and she agreed with a giggle. Cammy and I continued dancing, and occasionally, I would playfully move against him, causing him to grip my hips a bit tighter. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing our boyfriends, who appeared out of breath from rushing over. I greeted them with a smile before turning back to Cammy, sliding my hands over his arms and up to his neck as we continued to sway. 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐿, flopping onto the bed beside Mina, exclaimed about how we were trying to kill them with our dancing. Kirishima, sitting on the other side of Mina, commented on how hot we looked together. We settled onto our boyfriends' laps, chatting for a while as Mina promised to send me the video later. After an hour, we headed down to the common room to watch movies and enjoy the snacks we had bought. The rest of the day was filled with laughter and relaxation, and soon most of our classmates joined us to watch. Everything was perfect until 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐿 entered with a smug expression. The atmosphere shifted as everyone fell silent. Shoji paused the movie, and Midoriya, his voice laced with irritation, asked what she wanted. 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬 smugly announced that she had proof that 𝗏𝗏𝐽 had cheated on Midoriya. Everyone turned to look at 𝗏𝗏𝐽 and Midoriya, who remained calm, clearly unfazed by her claim. The class quickly defended them, insisting that 𝗏𝗏𝐽 would never betray Midoriya and that 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬 was lying. 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬, undeterred, claimed she had video evidence of 𝗏𝗏𝐽 kissing someone else. The room went quiet, and 𝗏𝗏𝐽 and Midoriya exchanged glances, curious about what she meant. 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬 connected her phone to the TV and played a short video, causing gasps to ripple through the room. On the screen, 𝗏𝗏𝐽 and Kirishima were seen sharing a passionate kiss. The class fell silent, unsure of how to react, and no one wanted to look at Midoriya's shocked expression. 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬 smiled triumphantly, reveling in the chaos she had created. Suddenly, 4 boys burst into laughter, drawing confused stares from the rest of the class. 𝗏𝗏𝐽, Midoriya, Kirishima, and Kaminari were laughing so hard that tears streamed down their faces. 𝗏𝗏𝐽 exclaimed that he had known about the kiss all along, leaving the class bewildered. Midoriya stood up from 𝗏𝗏𝐽's lap and addressed the class, asking if anyone remembered when he and 𝗏𝗏𝐽 had left for their date a few days prior. 𝗟𝗟 raised his hand, recalling that Midoriya had worn a light green lace dress. Midoriya thanked him and pointed to a corner of the room where a bush was located. He explained that it was his dress and that he had been present when 𝗏𝗏𝐽 and Kirishima kissed, even encouraging them to do so. The room fell silent once more as Midoriya turned to 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬, his expression filled with disdain. 𝗟𝐼𝐜𝐬 had left in tears, her threat hanging in the air as the class erupted in laughter. No one mentioned the video, respecting their friend's privacy. The day continued with laughter, jokes, and games. Later that night, an invitation was extended to Kiri and Cammy to join Izuku and Kaken in their dorm for a sleepover. Upon entering the room, Izuku revealed matching pajamas for himself and Cammy, though in different colors. The outfits consisted of a short-sleeve button-up shirt and a pair of shorts. Izuku's were light green, while Cammy's were light yellow. They changed in the bathroom while Kaken and Kiri changed in the bedroom. After changing, Izuku smiled at Cammy, complimenting him on how great he looked in the shorts. Cammy blushed and returned the compliment, leading them both to admire their reflections in the mirror. Izuku playfully pouted, suggesting that Cammy's appearance was softer. Cammy mirrored the gesture, and they shared a laugh, embracing each other before heading back to the bedroom. Kaken and Kiri were seated on the bed, engaged in conversation, both dressed in sweatpants and without shirts. Standing before them, Izuku turned to Cammy and then back to the boys, playfully asking whose appearance was softer. Kaken and Kiri exchanged smirks before Kaken suggested they test it out. He placed his hands on Izuku's hips, while Kiri did the same with Cammy. The atmosphere was light-hearted as they prepared to compare. Izuku and Cammy stood side by side, and Kaken and Kiri held their hips, playfully squeezing and commenting on how soft they felt. Kaken's teasing words made Izuku giggle, and they all enjoyed the playful banter. After a moment, Izuku suggested they switch places, and Kaken pulled Cammy closer, ready to continue the fun. Izuku stood in front of Kiri, guiding his hands to her waist while Kaken playfully engaged with Cammy. The laughter continued as they enjoyed the moment, and the atmosphere was filled with camaraderie. Eventually, Izuku flopped onto the bed, feeling tired and inviting everyone to join. Kaken settled beside her, draping an arm over her stomach, while Kiri and Cammy nestled close. With arms and legs intertwined, they shared a cozy moment, exchanging goodnights before drifting off to sleep. 2 days later, the start of the school week arrived. Izuku's father had hinted at a surprise for the day, wearing a mischievous smirk that left everyone feeling apprehensive. Izuku poked Kaken awake, urging him to get up. Kaken grumbled in response, and Izuku playfully stuck out his tongue, curious about what the day would bring. Who really knows? He was always so cryptic. Izuku observed as Kaken struggled to put on his tie, frustration evident on his face before he gave up with a huff. It seemed he must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. Izuku picked up the tie that had been tossed aside and stood in front of him, needing him to bend his knees so she could reach. Sometimes Kaken woke up in a worse mood than usual, but she was accustomed to it and had a reliable method for cheering him up. Once the tie was properly adjusted, she playfully tugged at it, bringing 𝐾𝐿 face to face with her. They were so close that Izuku could feel his breath on her lips. She encouraged him to stop being moody and suggested he let off some steam. In a moment of playful mischief, she liked his lips and nibbled at his bottom lip. 𝐾𝐿, caught off guard, lifted her up so she clung to him like a koala and playfully pressed her against the wall. He kissed her fiercely, their lips meeting with urgency. Without hesitation, she opened her mouth, allowing him access as he explored every corner with his tongue. Izuku tangled her fingers in his spiky hair, which was surprisingly soft. They only pulled apart when 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐾𝐮 entered, reminding them to hurry up. They welcomed the interruption, not minding the intrusion. 𝐾𝐿 gently set Izuku down, and she giggled, announcing that they were ready to leave. Izuku's perspective shifted as 𝐾𝐮 teased them about their affectionate displays whenever they arrived. She playfully pouted, admitting that 𝐾𝐿's kisses felt wonderful. Laughter erupted among them, and Izuku noted that the only ones who hadn't shared a kiss were 𝐾𝐮 and 𝐾𝐿. Just then, 𝐾𝐿 playfully slapped her, causing her to squeal in surprise, the warmth of the impact lingering. He called her a tease, pulling her closer, and she responded with a flirtatious remark, sliding her fingers up his forearms. 𝐾𝐿 rolled his eyes but smiled, leaning in to whisper that they would discuss it later. A shiver ran down her spine at the sensation of his breath against her ear, and she nodded, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. As they walked to class, Izuku linked her arm with 𝐾𝐿's, noticing that he seemed to remember something important. He proposed a double date for Saturday, grinning like a child. She smiled back and turned to 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐾𝐮, who were engrossed in something on 𝐾𝐮's phone. She informed them of the plan, and they nodded, returning to their distraction. Feeling a bit tired, she leaned her head on 𝐾𝐿's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. She murmured that it felt warm, and 𝐾𝐮 commented on how cute they looked, to which 𝐾𝐿 agreed, his grin evident in his voice. When 𝐾𝐿 asked if she was tired, she nodded and wrapped her arms around him too. Upon reaching the classroom, they received a few curious glances, likely because everyone assumed they were in a polyamorous relationship. Izuku felt uncertain about that perception but decided to discuss it with 𝐾𝐿 later. 𝐾𝐿 sat at his desk and pulled her onto his lap, cradling her like a child while stroking her hair. She smiled, enjoying the comforting gesture, and he kissed her head, causing her to blush. 𝐾𝐮 and 𝐾𝐿 exchanged grins, making her nervous enough to hide her face against 𝐾𝐿's chest. Fortunately, 𝐾𝐿 didn't seem to notice her embarrassment. Their teacher entered, announcing that they would begin written exams the following day, using the current day to study. When the teacher called for Izuku to return to her seat, the class turned to see her still on 𝐾𝐿's lap, while 𝐾𝐮 and 𝐾𝐿 struggled to suppress their laughter. She playfully protested, but the teacher sighed in exasperation, conceding that he didn't mind. Just then, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 appeared, causing the class to jump. The teacher groaned and settled into his sleeping bag, muttering about not being paid enough. Izuku turned her attention to 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who climbed onto her lap, sipping tea. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 informed the class that he would be giving personalized tests, allowing them to study together. Izuku felt excited about the opportunity to take tests tailored for her. She assured 𝐒𝐮𝐬 that she would study with her friends and looked forward to the questions he would pose. As he left, he reminded her not to forget their weekly chess match on Sunday, to which she eagerly replied that she wouldn't miss it. 𝐾𝐿, looking astonished, asked how smart she was, and 𝐾𝐿 proudly explained that 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had been meeting with her to play chess, as she was the only one who could provide a good challenge. Izuku blushed at the compliment and turned her attention back to 𝐾𝐿, assuring him that she would help him study. His eyes widened in surprise, and she began to gather study materials from her bag. The rest of the lesson was spent assisting 𝐾𝐿 with his studies, as she noticed he struggled with certain concepts. 𝐾𝐮 and 𝐾𝐿 occasionally glanced over at them, prompting her to stick her tongue out playfully, which made them laugh. Time passed, and during lunch on the roof, 𝐾𝐿 looked at her with a sigh, asking if she was okay. Setting her lunch aside, she focused on him, sensing the seriousness in his demeanor. She agreed to talk, feeling a hint of worry about what he might say. Or perhaps he was upset about the closeness between Izuku and 𝐾𝐿, or because Izuku had mentioned kissing 𝐾𝐮. The thought of a potential breakup crossed his mind. He could sense the overthinking, and it was just about the situation involving Kirishima and Kaminari. A sigh of relief escaped him as he acknowledged this. Izuku wanted to discuss it as well, settling himself in front of Kaken, legs draped around his waist. They both recognized their attraction to each other and the playful teasing that occurred among them. Izuku pondered how to express his feelings, gazing up at the sky for a moment before returning his attention to Kaken. He admitted to being confused, which surprised Kaken slightly. Kaken placed his hands on Izuku's waist, rubbing gentle circles on his skin, a calming gesture that reassured Izuku of Kaken's presence. Kaken encouraged him to share his thoughts, assuring him that it was okay to take his time. Izuku smiled and nodded, revealing his long-standing love for Kaken, explaining that he had never considered anyone else as a potential partner. Meeting Kiri and Kami had introduced him to wonderful friends, and he enjoyed their time together, but he found himself feeling similarly toward them as he did for Kaken, which left him perplexed. Kaken wiped away Izuku's tears and pressed his forehead against Izuku's, looking into his eyes. He urged Izuku not to cry, confessing that he felt the same confusion. Kaken expressed his love for Izuku and reassured him that he would never leave. He proposed the idea of discussing the possibility of being together as a group of 4. Izuku wiped his tears and shared a gentle kiss with Kaken, suggesting they wait until after their double date to explore this idea further, wanting to spend time together as a group before diving into one-on-one interactions. Kaken agreed, smiling and kissing Izuku again, expressing his love. Izuku playfully punched Kaken's shoulder, insisting that being smart didn't make him a dork. Kaken laughed, finding Izuku adorable when he pouted. Soon, Kiri and Kami joined them, and they all enjoyed each other's company while sharing a meal. Kaminari had been receiving help from Izuku with his studies throughout the week. Izuku's patience and understanding made the process enjoyable. They studied during school hours and shared lunch with Kiri and Kat, who suggested giving Kaminari a nickname since everyone else had one. After school, they continued to hang out and study, often ending up cuddled together in the same room. Kaminari was excited about the date he had planned with Izuku for Saturday, and they had a lot of fun organizing it together. However, Kaminari was also grappling with new feelings for both Kat and Izuku, reminiscent of his initial crush on Kiri, which left him confused about his emotions. He decided to talk to Kiri during lunch, wanting to express his feelings before their date. He had asked Kiri to meet him behind the school, the same spot where Kiri had asked him to be his boyfriend. As he waited, anxiety bubbled within him, fearing Kiri might react negatively. When Kiri arrived, he noticed Kaminari's nervousness and asked if he was okay. Kaminari stammered, feeling heat rise to his cheeks while fidgeting with the hem of his skirt, which he wore to feel cute alongside Izuku. Kiri encouraged him to share whatever was on his mind. Kaminari hesitated, finally admitting it was about Izuku and Katsuki. Kiri seemed to anticipate his feelings, confirming that he, too, had been wanting to discuss their mutual attraction. Kaminari was relieved to hear this, but he still felt uncertain about what it meant for their relationship. Kiri reassured him that it was perfectly fine to have feelings for multiple people as long as everyone involved agreed. Kaminari blushed, questioning if Izuku and Katsuki felt the same way. Kiri lifted Kaminari's chin, encouraging him to look into his eyes as he expressed confidence that they would be open to the idea. Kaminari felt a wave of relief wash over him, grateful that Kiri didn't harbor any resentment. Kiri affirmed his love and promised that if they pursued a relationship with Izuku and Katsuki, he would love them all equally. Kaminari smiled, leaning in for a kiss, feeling lighter afterward. He expressed his gratitude for meeting Kiri and their friends. Kiri hoped that Izuku and Katsuki would reciprocate their feelings, and Kaminari's mind raced with worry about the possibility of rejection. Kiri comforted him, insisting that no one could resist Kaminari's charm. Blushing, Kaminari hid his face against Kiri's chest, feeling overwhelmed. Kiri placed a gentle kiss on his temple, urging him to return to their friends. They intertwined their fingers and made their way to the roof, where they found Kat and Izuku engaged in a passionate kiss. Izuku sat on Kat's legs, straddling him, while Kat had his hands on Izuku's waist. Both Kiri and I stopped in our tracks, unable to take our eyes off them. Cat opened his eyes and noticed us standing there. Instead of pulling away, he smirked and playfully squeezed Zuku's waist. Zuku, wearing the girl's uniform, felt the fabric shift slightly. He let out a soft sound of surprise and rolled his hips forward, pressing against Cat. I glanced at Kiri, who was as red as his hair, and he muttered under his breath, clearly flustered. I tightened my grip on his hand, unable to find the words, and turned back to the two boys, still lost in their moment. Cat slowly pulled away, teasingly tugging at Zuku's bottom lip, which made Zuku let out a small sound. Cat then greeted us with a smirk. Zuku turned around, and upon seeing us, his face turned an even deeper shade of red. He stood up, adjusting his skirt and hair, and pulled us both into a hug, pouting as he said they had taken too long. I hurried to sit down next to them, trying to act nonchalant but failing miserably. Cat winked at us, suggesting we had enjoyed the show, while Zuku playfully hit him on the chest. Cat, unfazed, simply sat there with a proud grin. Kaminari's perspective shifted as he remarked that they had indeed enjoyed the moment, especially the part where Zuku had made a sound. Both Zuku and I turned as red as tomatoes and urged them to be quiet. Zuku then decided to take me away to the other side of the roof to eat in peace. He expressed his embarrassment, burying his head in his hands, while I reassured him that it was fine and that he had sounded charming. Zuku lifted his head, smiled at me, and thanked me with a gentle kiss on my cheek, making me blush. We enjoyed our food together before returning to Cat and Kiri to chat for the remainder of lunch. Zuku woke up to the sound of his alarm ringing loudly. 𝐾𝐿 yelled for it to be turned off, covering his head with a pillow. Zuku laughed, sitting up and leaning over 𝐾𝐿 to silence the alarm. He stretched his arms overhead, gently waking 𝐾𝐿 by stroking his hair. When 𝐾𝐿 grunted in response, Zuku rolled his eyes and got out of bed. After preparing for his shower, he called out to 𝐾𝐿, teasing him about taking care of himself. 𝐾𝐿 quickly got up and rushed to the bathroom, locking eyes with Zuku, warning him not to think about it. Zuku giggled and invited him into the shower, where 𝐾𝐿 embraced him from behind, complimenting his beauty. Zuku smiled back, returning the compliment. After showering and drying their hair, they dressed in nice outfits for their date. 𝐾𝐿 wore black ripped jeans and a dark blue tank top adorned with rings and silver chains. Zuku chose a black flared skirt and a lilac 𝐼𝐴 top with a butterfly design, adding clips to keep his hair out of his face. 𝐾𝐿 admired Zuku's appearance, calling him cute, and Zuku returned the compliment, saying 𝐾𝐿 looked handsome. They discussed their plans for the day, considering how to spend time with their friends while also enjoying moments alone together. Zuku felt a wave of nervousness wash over him as he expressed his concerns about dating multiple people, fearing his father's reaction. 𝐾𝐿, sensing his unease, reassured him that his father would never hate him and suggested talking to him before meeting with Nizu. Zuku felt comforted by 𝐾𝐿's words and expressed his love for him, receiving a tender response in return. They shared a quiet moment together, allowing Zuku to calm down. Zuku suggested they head to Kirishima's dorm for breakfast before their outing. 𝐾𝐿 agreed, playfully considering using nicknames for their friends to see their reactions. They made their way to Kiri's dorm room, excited for the day ahead. Kirishima woke up to Cammy shaking him, urging him not to be late for their date. He smiled at Cammy, pulling him back into bed for a moment longer. He sounded adorable when he yelped just then. Kiri urged him to get dressed, and as he sat up, it became clear he was already ready to go. He wore a charming pink dress with white lace around the hem and sleeves, paired with cute white sandals. Kiri complimented him, saying he looked amazing and would impress everyone. He blushed and thanked Kiri, then began searching through the drawers. He tossed some blue ripped jeans at Kiri, and as he reached for a top, Kiri stopped him, wanting to choose it himself. Kiri jumped out of bed, slipped on the jeans, and removed his shirt. He noticed Cammy glancing at him before looking away, which made him smirk. He playfully teased Cammy, who turned bright red and stammered a response. Kiri chuckled and returned to the drawers, pulling out a light pink jumper he hadn't worn before and putting it on. He decided to leave his hair down that day. Cammy complimented him, saying he looked handsome, and brushed his fingers through Kiri's hair before leaning in for a kiss. Kiri smiled into the kiss, pulling Cammy closer and savoring the moment. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Kat burst in, announcing they better be ready. He paused upon seeing them and grinned, noting they seemed to have missed all the fun. Kiri chuckled, noticing both Cammy and Izuku blushing. He suggested that maybe Kat and Izuku could join next time, and they exchanged smiles. Izuku ran over to Cammy, hugging him and calling him pretty, to which Cammy replied with gratitude and a compliment of his own. Izuku then hugged Kiri, telling him he looked handsome as well. Kiri thanked Izuku, who blushed and smiled back, then looked down shyly. Kat suggested they get something to eat and head to their destination, pulling everyone toward the door. Cammy and Izuku walked ahead, hand in hand, giggling together. Kiri looked Kat up and down, smiling as he complimented him. Kat turned slightly pink in response and returned the compliment, saying Kiri looked cool with his hair down. Kiri felt himself blush and quickly looked away, trying to shake off the compliment. As they walked, Kiri noticed Kat staring at him, prompting him to smirk and tease that there was no need to stare. Kat smiled back, admitting he couldn't help it because Kiri looked cute. Kiri was taken aback by the sincerity in Kat's eyes but simply smiled and thanked him, mentioning he didn't usually wear his hair down. Kat expressed his liking for it, brushing a stray hair from Kiri's face, which made Kiri blush again. They continued walking and realizing they had fallen behind, Kat grabbed Kiri's arm, urging him to catch up with their friends. After enjoying a meal prepared by Kat, who was an excellent cook, they decided to head out. Izuku informed Aizawa they were leaving, and they bid farewell to their classmates. Once outside the gates, Izuku took Kiri's hand, pulling him ahead of the others. He expressed his excitement about the day, though a hint of worry crossed his face. Kiri reassured him, holding him closer and wrapping an arm around his waist, promising they would have fun. Izuku smiled up at him, and Kiri felt a rush of affection, almost leaning in for a kiss. Izuku bounced with enthusiasm, his excitement palpable, though he only jumped slightly higher than Kiri's head. Kiri noted that Izuku was the smallest among them, just reaching his shoulders, and found it endearing. He realized he had been staring when Izuku asked if something was wrong, worried about his appearance. Kiri blushed and cleared his throat, quickly complimenting Izuku on his cuteness, which made him blush even more. Izuku wrapped his arm around Kiri's waist, returning the compliment, which made Kiri smile even wider. As they walked, Izuku shyly admitted he liked when Kiri kissed his head. Kiri felt butterflies in his stomach, relieved that Izuku found it comforting. He smiled and kissed Zuku's temple again, which made Izuku giggle, a sound that made Kiri's heart skip a beat. Izuku led them back to the others, and Kiri stood between Kiri and Kat while Izuku walked backward, facing them as he excitedly announced they were almost there. Just as Izuku was about to dash off, Kiri caught his wrist, pulling him back to his side. The group shared a laugh, playfully insisting that Izuku should not wander off. Izuku, however, pouted slightly before linking his hand with Kiri's and resting his head on Kiri's shoulder. He expressed his disappointment at the group's antics, but the atmosphere remained lighthearted. The narrator felt a warm sensation as Kat slid his hand into theirs, and when they looked at him, Kat was simply grinning, focused ahead. The narrator glanced at Izuku, who was smiling back, seemingly unbothered by the moment. Izuku pointed excitedly at a bush, announcing they were just around the corner, and he tugged Kiri along with him. The narrator chuckled at their cuteness and complimented Kat, feeling a blush rise to their cheeks. Kat's words caught the narrator off guard, and they stammered a shy thank you. Suddenly, Kat stopped, gently caressing the narrator's cheek and lifting their chin to meet his gaze. He placed a soft kiss on their cheek and squeezed their hand, encouraging them to catch up with the others. Nodding, the narrator led the way, and soon they reached the entrance of the amusement park, where their friends were waiting, smiling and laughing. They exchanged tickets and entered the park, ready for a fun-filled day. Kirishima observed Izuku as they waited for Cammy and Kat to join them after purchasing tickets. Izuku's excitement was infectious as he looked around. Kirishima asked if Izuku liked amusement parks, and Izuku paused, deep in thought, looking adorably cute with his tongue slightly sticking out. Kirishima felt a pang of sympathy, realizing Izuku had missed out on experiences like this. Izuku finally replied that he had never been to one but thought they seemed fun. Kirishima promised they would make sure Izuku tried everything at least once, which made 𝐒𝐮𝐬 beam with joy. Their laughter filled the air as Kat and Cammy arrived, hand in hand. The day was filled with laughter and fun. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 ended up with ice cream all over his face, and Cammy kindly wiped it away. They took turns sitting next to each other on the roller coasters, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 clung to Kirishima's hand tightly during the rides. When they reached the pool area, they changed into swimming trunks. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 hesitated at the edge of the pool, fiddling with his fingers and looking down. Kirishima exchanged a glance with Kat, who swam over to check on 𝐒𝐮𝐬. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 mumbled something that was hard to hear, and they reassured him that they were there for him. Finally, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 admitted he didn't know how to swim, and Kirishima felt a wave of understanding wash over him. Cammy encouraged 𝐒𝐮𝐬, and Kirishima offered to help him into the water. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 sat on the edge, legs dangling in the water, looking uncertain. Kirishima positioned himself between 𝐒𝐮𝐬's legs and guided him to hold onto his shoulders. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 hesitated but eventually complied, and Kirishima assured him he would be safe. As he carefully pulled 𝐒𝐮𝐬 into the water, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 wrapped his legs around Kirishima's waist, gripping his shoulders tightly. Kirishima checked in with 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who seemed worried, and held him close, reassuring him with gentle movements. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressed his gratitude, and Kirishima felt a shiver at the warmth of 𝐒𝐮𝐬's breath against his neck. 𝐒𝐮𝐬's innocent question about whether he had done something wrong caught Kirishima off guard, especially when 𝐒𝐮𝐬 playfully teased him. Kirishima felt a rush of warmth as 𝐒𝐮𝐬's playful antics continued, and he couldn't help but smile. Just then, Kat and Cammy returned, and Cammy noticed 𝐒𝐮𝐬's flushed cheeks, asking what had happened. Kirishima grinned, teasing 𝐒𝐮𝐬 about his playful behavior, while Kat tried to suppress laughter. 𝐒𝐮𝐬, eager to change the subject, squealed that they should go somewhere else, and Kirishima helped him out of the pool. As they changed, Kirishima found it amusing to see 𝐒𝐮𝐬 trying to hide his blush whenever their eyes met. Kat chuckled quietly, and Cammy was already brainstorming their next adventure. This date was turning out to be a delightful experience for everyone involved. Izuku and 𝐾𝐿 decided to separate from the others during lunch to discuss their day so far. They found a small, secluded bench where they could enjoy their meal in peace. Once they finished eating, 𝐾𝐿 took Izuku's hand as Izuku rested his head on 𝐾𝐿's arm. 𝐾𝐿 raised an eyebrow and asked what had happened at the pool that had made Izuku so flustered. Izuku buried his face in 𝐾𝐿's arm, feeling shy. He explained that when he hugged someone and thanked them, he felt them shiver and grip his thighs, leading him to think their neck might be sensitive. 𝐾𝐿 burst out laughing before Izuku could finish his story, causing Izuku to furrow his brows in mock anger. 𝐾𝐿 smiled down at him, pecked his lips, and pulled him into his lap. He teased Izuku, saying he wasn't surprised since Izuku's tongue was more sensitive than most. Izuku blushed and defended himself, saying it felt good when he used his tongue. 𝐾𝐿 smiled and kissed Izuku's cheek, whispering that he enjoyed it when they kissed. Encouraged, Izuku adjusted himself and began running his fingers through 𝐾𝐿's soft hair. He continued his story, mentioning that after he liked the other person, they had told him he was playing a dangerous game, while squeezing just under his butt, which felt amazing. 𝐾𝐿 smirked, reminding Izuku that teasing had its consequences. Izuku rolled his eyes and laughed, calling 𝐾𝐿 stupid. 𝐾𝐿 then turned Izuku around so that he was straddling him, gently rubbing the skin just under Izuku's shirt. He asked if Izuku wanted some alone time to try kissing the other person. After a moment of thought, Izuku nodded, admitting he wanted to kiss Cammy too. He smiled at 𝐾𝐿 and kissed him on the lips, prompting 𝐾𝐿 to suggest that Izuku should use his tongue since it had worked well before. 𝐾𝐿's hands slid from Izuku's waist to his hips, pulling him closer. Izuku leaned in for a passionate kiss, trying to deepen it, but 𝐾𝐿 playfully denied him. In a playful moment, Izuku tugged at 𝐾𝐿's hair, causing 𝐾𝐿 to exclaim in surprise. Izuku took the opportunity to push his tongue into 𝐾𝐿's mouth, swirling it around and gently flicking at 𝐾𝐿's tongue. They pulled away, both breathing and blushing. Izuku wiped the remaining moisture from 𝐾𝐿's lips and playfully licked his finger. 𝐾𝐿 complimented Izuku, expressing how attractive he found him, while trying to regain his composure. They decided it was time to find Kiri and Cammy. Izuku smiled as he climbed off 𝐾𝐿, offering his hand to help him up. 𝐾𝐿 wondered if their friends would reciprocate their feelings, revealing his shyness about such matters. Izuku reassured him that the worst outcome would be remaining best friends. 𝐾𝐿 expressed his longing for them all to be together, looking a bit worried. Izuku stood in front of him, cupping his cheek with his free hand, promising that no matter what happened, he would always be with 𝐾𝐿 and that their friends would remain in their lives. 𝐾𝐿 hugged Izuku tightly, expressing his love and appreciation for him. Izuku smiled, feeling happy, and kissed 𝐾𝐿's knuckles, causing 𝐾𝐿 to blush. As they continued walking, they eventually found Kiri and Cammy, and together they explored the various rides and games available to them. After Izuku and 𝐾𝐿 had left, Kiri and Cammy enjoyed a peaceful lunch together until Cammy asked Kiri why Izuku had been so red earlier. Kiri's eyes widened as he turned bright red, recalling how Izuku had hugged him and thanked him for helping him into the pool. He mentioned that Izuku's breath had hit his neck, which made Cammy smirk knowingly, aware of how sensitive Kiri's neck was. Kiri continued, explaining that Izuku had liked his neck, prompting him to grab Izuku just under his butt, nearly making him Cammy laughed but quickly stopped when Kiri glared at him. Kiri expressed his concern about whether Izuku and 𝐾𝐿 were teasing them for fun or if they genuinely liked them. Cammy, noticing Kiri's change in mood, took his hand and reassured him that he believed they liked them. He recalled how 𝐾𝐿 had called him by his nickname and played a game with him, knowing he enjoyed it. Kiri smiled, realizing that it felt like they were on a first date with Izuku and 𝐾𝐿. Cammy then suggested that perhaps their separation and alternating companionship were ways for them to explore what it would be like to date each other. Kiri considered this and was surprised by how much sense it made. They both pondered the possibility of one of them getting kissed, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness at the thought. That's a date thing, right? The characters smiled at their companion, thinking about how adorable he was. They wondered if he wanted to kiss any of the others. Surprised, the companion blushed and smiled shyly. He admitted that he did want to, hiding his face in his hands in embarrassment. The character gently pulled his hands away and placed a soft kiss on his lips, calling him cute. They suggested that if one of the others tried to kiss him, he should kiss back. The character then asked if it would be all right to kiss one of them. The companion, still a bit shocked, smiled and said he wouldn't mind, expressing that he would be happy if they all kissed each other, as it would mean they liked them. Nervously, he began to fiddle with his fingers. The character reminded him that they didn't have to wait for the others to make a move, they could initiate a kiss and see how the others reacted. Cuddling closer, the companion admitted that he was bad at initiating such things and would feel very nervous. The character chuckled, kissed his head, and ran their fingers through his hair, encouraging him. The companion pointed out that he had kissed the character plenty of times and could do it if he really wanted to. The character playfully pinched his cheek, telling him no pouting was allowed. The companion giggled and pushed the character's hand away, and they shared a bright smile before embracing again. The companion decided to see how things went and maybe kiss one of the others if he found the courage. He suggested that if they were right about the others wanting to spend time with them, he would be with 𝐾𝐿 while the character would be with Izu. The companion tilted his head in confusion and asked why the character thought that. The character explained that he and Izu hadn't spent much time alone together, just as the companion hadn't with 𝐾𝐿, so it made sense to get to know each other one-on-one. The companion made an adorable "oh" face and nodded in agreement, expressing hope that he would be able to kiss 𝐾𝐿. The character playfully asked if he wanted to practice, biting their lip. The companion blushed and quietly agreed. The character smiled and pulled him onto their lap, teasing that he would have to initiate it if he wanted to kiss. The companion liked his lips, wrapped his hands around the character's neck, and slowly leaned in. He kissed gently, running his hands through the character's hair. The character let him lead the kiss, hoping it would build his confidence for when he tried to kiss one of the boys. The companion's tongue brushed against the character's bottom lip, seeking entrance, and the character opened their mouth. The kiss deepened, becoming more intense as the companion explored. When he pulled away, the character complimented him, surprised at how good a kisser he was for someone who claimed to be shy. The companion blushed, wiped his lips, and climbed off the character, saying he was a good kisser too. He suggested they go meet the others, and the character smiled, holding his waist from behind as they walked together. After another hour of enjoying the rides and attractions, 𝐼𝐬𝐬 wanted to go into the haunted house. The companion was too scared, so the character asked Kiri to accompany 𝐼𝐬𝐬 while he took the companion to the Ferris wheel. The companion thanked him for staying, and the character smiled, saying he liked Ferris wheels anyway. The companion blushed and looked away as they walked, and the character gently took his hand, pulling him closer. The companion gripped his hand back and wrapped his other arm around the character's. Once they were on the Ferris wheel, they sat next to each other and chatted about various topics. At some point, they began discussing Izuku's past. The companion expressed happiness that Izuku's family would be coming to you, noting how happy it made him. The character agreed, mentioning that Izuku had been restless since he found out, which they found cute. Sliding his arm around the companion's waist, the character felt him lean closer, blushing as he complimented the character, saying he could be cute too. The character was taken aback, realizing that the companion thought he was cute, something only Izuku had said before. Noticing the companion twirling his fingers nervously, the character gently placed his hand on top of the companion's to stop the fidgeting. He reassured him, saying he was glad he thought he was cute. The companion smiled shyly and began playing with the character's hand, tracing the lines on his palm while stroking his fingers. The character comforted him by stroking his waist. The companion remarked on how big the character's hands were, and when he noticed the character staring, he blushed. Their eyes locked, creating a moment of connection. The character admired the companion's striking electric yellow eyes, which suited him perfectly. He moved his hand to the companion's face, tucking some stray hair behind his ear and complimenting his beauty. The companion gasped, blushing even more, and shifted his gaze. The character reassured him that he was indeed appealing, lifting his chin to meet his gaze and smiling warmly. Suddenly, the companion leaned in and kissed the character, gripping the front of his shirt. For a moment, the character was taken aback by his boldness but quickly pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. The companion opened his mouth, granting permission, and the character explored gently with his tongue. The companion climbed into the character's lap, wrapping his arms around his neck and gripping his hair as he tried to lead the kiss. The character allowed him to take the lead, wanting to understand how he preferred to kiss. He noticed the companion used his tongue sparingly and liked to nibble on his lip. Once he had a good sense of the companion's preferences, the character pulled him closer, taking charge of the kiss. He initially tensed in surprise but soon relaxed into the kiss. After a few moments, he pulled away, breathing heavily with his eyes still closed, looking undeniably cute. The other person wondered if something was wrong and loosened their grip on his waist. He reassured them that everything was fine, just needing a moment to catch his breath. They chuckled and began to caress his cheek while he tried to calm himself. He mentioned that he hadn't expected the other to make the first move, smiling as he took their hand from his cheek to hold it. They teased him, raising an eyebrow and pretending to think aloud about how a compliment might lead to a kiss. He turned pink and covered his face with his hands, mumbling something. Leaning in, they whispered playfully, prompting him to shiver as he rested his hands on their chest. He clarified that compliments weren't necessary, a kiss would suffice. They smiled and shared a gentle kiss, promising to keep that in mind. He giggled and sat back down next to them as the ride neared its end. Hand in hand, they approached the haunted house, where they met Kiri and 𝐼𝐬𝐬, who were also holding hands. The other persons smiled to themselves as 𝐾𝐮𝐬 shouted to gain their attention. Izuku's perspective shifted as he recalled telling the boys he wanted to visit the haunted house. However, 𝐾𝐮𝐬 was scared, so Katsuki accompanied him while Kiri joined Izuku. Excitement bubbled within him as he expressed hope that it wouldn't be too frightening. Kiri laughed and grabbed his hand, guiding him through the crowd. He reassured Izuku that if anything jumped out he would punch it, which made Izuku smile as he held on tighter. As they ventured through the house, surprises leaped out at them, causing Izuku to scream and grip Kiri's arm even more tightly. Kiri teased him, saying he screamed louder than present mic, prompting Izuku to stick his tongue out in playful defiance. They continued through the spooky environment until they found an empty storage room to take a break. The dim light illuminated their faces just enough to see each other, and there was a small distance between them. Izuku sighed in relief, grateful for the pause, and leaned his head against the wall behind him. Kiri chuckled from the opposite wall, teasing that it wasn't that scary. Izuku opened his eyes and glared at him, insisting that it had been terrifying and that he could have had a heart attack. Kiri laughed even harder, holding his stomach. Izuku, still feeling his heart racing, walked over to Kiri and placed his hand on his chest to let him feel the rapid heartbeat. Kiri remarked that it felt normal, raising an eyebrow, while Izuku pouted and crossed his arms, insisting it had been scary. Kiri, unable to contain his amusement, took a step closer, smirking as he challenged Izuku to see if he could get his heart racing. Before Izuku could respond, Kiri had him caged between himself and the wall, hands on either side of Izuku's face. Izuku realized Kiri was trying to provoke a reaction from him, but he preferred to do things his own way. With a smirk, he slid his hands up Kiri's shirt, tracing his fingers over his abs, imagining what it would be like to be pinned down by him. He noticed Kiri clenching his jaw at his touch. Leaning up, Izuku placed a kiss on Kiri's neck, feeling the tension in his muscles. Kiri began to step back, but Izuku followed, continuing to place gentle kisses along his neck. When Kiri found himself against the wall, Izuku wrapped his arms around his neck and pressed closer. He whispered a question in a deeper tone, and Kiri responded with a quiet exclamation, grabbing Izuku's waist. Izuku smiled, pushing his leg between Kiri's, prompting him to lift him up and wrap his legs around his waist. Kiri turned them around so that Izuku was pressed against the wall, and their lips met in a heated kiss. Izuku giggled as their tongues danced together, and Kiri pulled away only to tease his lips, liking and skiing gently. They shared a playful moment, and as they slowed down, they pulled away, both smiling. Izuku rested his head on Kiri's shoulder, acknowledging that his heart was racing now. Kiri chuckled and gently set him down, commenting on Izuku's teasing nature. Flushed, Izuku looked away while Kiri held onto his waist, and when asked if he disliked it, he turned back to meet Kiri's gaze, smiling as he admitted he loved it, appreciating Kiri's honesty. The warmth of the moment enveloped them as one character smiled at another, sharing a gentle kiss. With arms wrapped around him, they embraced, feeling a sense of comfort. The other character chuckled, suggesting it was time to leave the haunted house, and they both agreed, their laughter echoing as they made their way out, still startled by the surprises that had jumped out at them. They waited outside for their friends, Cammy and 𝐾𝐿, for about 10 minutes before spending the rest of the night together. After returning from the amusement park, Izuku invited everyone to stay the night in his dorm, boasting a spacious bed, a benefit of having their homeroom teacher as his father. Once inside, Izuku eagerly jumped onto his bed, exclaiming how tired he felt. Kat settled beside him, playfully pulling Izuku on top of him. He offered to give Izuku a massage, and Izuku responded with a hug and a light kiss on the cheek, nodding in agreement. Kiri and another character joined them on the bed, suggesting that they should all give each other massages to make it fair. Kiri, smiling and bouncing with excitement, agreed. Izuku jumped up to find some shorts for everyone, while Kat did the same for Kiri. The two of them changed in the bathroom, while Izuku and Kat changed in the bedroom. As one character was changing, Kiri wrapped his arms around him from behind, pressing close. Feeling a blush rise at the unexpected contact, he was surprised when Kiri whispered about kissing Izuku. His eyes widened, and he turned to face Kiri, who confirmed it with a smile. Kiri then mentioned kissing Kat as well, describing it as a sweet experience. The two shared a knowing look, agreeing that their friends seemed to have feelings for them. Kiri gently stroked the character's cheek, his gaze lingering on his lips. He playfully teased about whether he would enjoy a similar experience, causing a blush to deepen. The playful moment continued until they finished changing, both feeling a bit shy about wearing just shorts but reassured that Izuku would feel the same. When they emerged from the bathroom, they found Izuku sitting on Kat's lap, both of them looking at each other with warmth and affection. Izuku greeted them with a smile, and they settled on the bed, leaning against the wall for support. Kiri sprawled out on the bed, asking who would massage whom. Izuku playfully complained about Kiri taking up too much space, jumping on him and laying across his stomach, which made them all laugh. One character suggested that it would be easier for him and Kiri to massage each other since they shared similar builds. Izuku, straddling Kiri, held onto his waist while Kiri winked at the other character, who rolled his eyes in response. He then decided to fetch some lotion from the bathroom, returning to toss it onto the bed. With a grin, he instructed Izuku to lie down on his stomach, ready to start the massage. Kat smirked, and Izuku looked at him in confusion, thinking it would be amusing to see him take action. Laughter erupted between Kat and Kiri, while Izuku felt his cheeks flush. Izuku playfully kicked at Kat, who caught his ankle just in time. Izuku huffed, pulling his leg back and lying down on the bed. Kat teased that perhaps Izuku could use a brain replacement, prompting laughter from everyone, though Kat turned away, slightly annoyed. Kiri, trying to lighten the mood, draped an arm over Kat's shoulders, while I climbed onto Izuku and began to rub lotion on his back. Kat playfully pushed Kiri onto the bed and sat on his lower back. We decided to take turns for massages, setting a timer for 20 minutes each. As we chatted, Kat and I worked on Kiri and Izuku, who lay back with their eyes closed, enjoying the relaxation. Izuku reflected on his family, feeling excitement about their visit the next day. He missed them dearly. Lost in thought, he realized it was his turn to massage me. We switched positions, and I began to rub his back, complimenting his smooth skin. Izuku blushed and buried his face in the covers, which made me smile at his cuteness. Kiri chimed in, explaining how a special cream kept his skin healthy, while I watched him massage 𝐾𝐿, noticing his muscles flexing. Izuku continued the conversation, mentioning that 𝐾𝐿's smooth skin was due to their frequent cuddling. Cammy playfully complained about having to spend money on cream while Izuku had it easy. Laughter filled the room, and I grinned at 𝐾𝐿, who caught my gaze. Kiri suggested that Cammy could borrow 𝐾𝐿 if he wanted, which made Cammy blush. Again, I shifted to massage lower on Izuku's back and asked if he had a favorite animal to transform into. Izuku reminisced about turning into a cat to nap on his brother's lap, a memory that brought a smile to his face. Kiri commented on his cute smile, causing Izuku to blush again. Just then, a sharp pain struck Izuku's head, and he instinctively put his hand to it, closing his eyes tightly. The pain intensified, and he cried out, alarming the others. Concern washed over 𝐾𝐿, Kiri, and Cammy as they looked at him with worry. Izuku managed to tell them it was just a headache, but the pain escalated, feeling unbearable. He clutched his hair, tears streaming down his face as he thrashed in distress. The door burst open, revealing his father, who rushed in with the class behind him, all looking alarmed. His father scooped him into his arms, soothing him while demanding to know what had happened. Cammy explained that Izuku had initially complained of a headache before the pain escalated. Izuku could barely articulate his suffering, crying out that it hurt everywhere. His father quickly picked him up and dashed out of the dorms toward 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐃, with Kiri, 𝐾𝐿, and Cammy close behind. Izuku sobbed for his family, and his father reassured him that they would figure out what was wrong. As they rushed down the hall, Izuku clung to his father's scarf, still in pain but feeling comforted by his presence. He expressed a longing to see his mother and brother, and his father promised to bring them. As Izuku's consciousness began to fade, he heard his father calling for Recovery Girl. When Izuku next awoke, he felt drowsy and sluggish, lying on a small bed in Recovery Girl's office with wires attached to him. His father sat beside him, holding his hand. Kiri, 𝐾𝐿, and Cammy were asleep in chairs nearby. Izuku squeezed his father's hand lightly, causing his father to wake up, eyes wide with tears of relief. His father expressed his worry, and Izuku apologized, feeling weak but okay. His father gently rubbed the back of his hand and informed him that they had contacted his family, who were on their way. Izuku gasped, trying to sit up, but his body felt too weak for now. He received a nod and a small smile in response, and tears began to stream down his face, landing on the pillow. Finally, he was really going to see them. Dad leaned over and embraced him as he sobbed into his neck, overwhelmed with happiness at the thought of reuniting after such a long time. Once he calmed down, he noticed 𝐾𝐿 stirring in his sleep, which caused Kiri and Cammy to wake as well. 𝐾𝐿 opened his eyes first and yawned. Upon seeing the smile on his face, he shot out of the chair and rushed over, clearly relieved to see him awake. 𝐾𝐿 exclaimed in surprise, expressing how scared he had been, and pulled him into a tight hug. He giggled as 𝐾𝐿 released him, and 𝐾𝐿 apologized while resting his head against his. He smiled back, and 𝐾𝐿 helped him sit up, which was challenging at first, but he felt more alert now. Kiri and Cammy both sat up, rubbing the sleep from their eyes. Cammy was the first to notice he was awake and rushed over, falling onto him as he cried about how frightened he had been, fearing the worst. He gently ran his hands through Cammy's hair, reassuring him that he wasn't going anywhere. Cammy lifted his head to look at him, and he wiped away his tears, telling him not to cry, as it would ruin his pretty face. Cammy blushed and stood beside the bed. Kiri approached from the other side, holding his hand and expressing relief at seeing him awake again. He kissed his hand, making him blush even more, and he asked how long he had been out. The others looked at him with concern but smiled again, easing his anxiety. Dad answered that he had only been out through the night and that it was now 2 p.m. He sighed, furrowing his brows as he recalled the intense pain he had felt, as if he were being melted from the inside out. 𝐾𝐿, who was sitting by his legs and rubbing his thigh reassuringly, asked what was wrong. He inquired about what had happened to him, recalling that he had felt fine before being engulfed in pain. The others looked at Dad, who nodded, seemingly giving them permission to explain. Kiri stated that he had been hit by someone's quirk, a sad smile on his face. They believed it had occurred at the amusement park. He nodded as Kiri recounted the events but questioned why someone would use a quirk on him without him noticing. 𝐾𝐿 shook his head and explained that the individual responsible had been part of the league before it disbanded. He clarified that the person had acted out of revenge for being forgotten and for the plans to harm heroes. The pros had apprehended him and were waiting for the police to question him. It took a moment for him to process this information. He expressed concern about the pain he had felt, wondering if the individual had done something to him. Cammy comforted him with gentle words, while Kiri and 𝐾𝐿 smiled, helping him to relax so Dad could speak. Dad reassured him that the individual had only caused him pain and that once he felt better, he would be able to return to school and his normal routine. He sighed in relief and smiled at them all. Just then, Dad's phone rang, and after answering, he looked bored but turned to face him with a smirk. He tilted his head in confusion as Dad mentioned that he had some visitors. He gasped, instantly knowing who Dad meant. He nodded, indicating he was ready to see them, and Dad left the room. The boys moved to one side of the bed as they awaited his family's arrival. The door opened, and Dad walked in, followed by his older brother and mother. He carefully jumped off the bed, pulling out the needles in his arm, and rushed to them. 𝐒𝐮𝐲 was the first to embrace him, lifting him up as they both cried. 𝐒𝐮𝐲 expressed his relief at seeing him safe and how much he had missed him. He felt 𝐒𝐮𝐲's grip tighten as he brushed a hand through his hair. He reassured 𝐒𝐮𝐲 that he was no longer angry about being sent back, only grateful to be together again, expressing his love for his brother. After a heartfelt moment, he got off 𝐒𝐮𝐲 and smiled up at him as he kissed his cheek. He then jumped into his mother's arms, hugging him tightly and feeling the familiar mist surrounding him, indicating that he was hugging back. He expressed how much he had missed his mother's cooking, prompting laughter from everyone as his mother pulled away to look at him. His mother mentioned missing his paintings, and he smiled in response. 𝐾𝐿 and Dad gently reminded him that he couldn't be up and about just yet, and 𝐒𝐮𝐲 sat on the bed, pulling him into his lap. He curled up against 𝐒𝐮𝐲's shoulder, noticing 𝐾𝐿 looking a bit jealous, which made him giggle. He excitedly told 𝐒𝐮𝐲 that 𝐾𝐿 was his boyfriend, pointing proudly at him. 𝐾𝐿 puffed out his chest, while Cammy and Kiri tried to suppress their laughter. 𝐒𝐮𝐲 looked at 𝐾𝐿 and then grinned at him, acknowledging the new development in their relationship. The thought of being called my childhood friend and future husband made Izuku blush bright red, and he buried his head in 𝐒𝐮𝐲's shoulder, urging him to be quiet. He noticed 𝐾𝐿 also turned red but was smiling too. With excitement, he pointed at his dad, introducing him as 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐻, while Mama smiled at him and 𝐒𝐮𝐲 looked surprised yet genuinely happy. Izuku expressed his gratitude for having a good life, nodding with a smile. He then pointed at Kiri and Cammy, appeared a bit nervous. 𝐒𝐮𝐲 raised an eyebrow and smirked, acknowledging the friends. He thanked them for taking care of his little brother, poking Izuku's stomach playfully, causing him to giggle and push his hand away. Mama agreed, thanking everyone with a warm smile. It felt wonderful to have his most important people gathered in one room. They spent the next hour chatting about various topics while Dad took a nap in his sleeping bag. Izuku noticed that Kami and Shigi got along well, and Shigi and Mama seemed to enjoy everyone's company, filling him with happiness. Throughout it all, he cuddled up to Shigi, missing the time spent with his big brother. Eventually, Shigi and Mama had to leave with Dad to prepare for school and sort out their dorms. Izuku insisted that Kami, Kaken, and Kiri take a break for lunch and freshen up since they had been in the room the entire time he was there. Alone, his thoughts drifted to Kiri and Kami, and the feelings he had for them. He wanted to discuss it with Dad but was uncertain about how he would react. Just then, the door opened, and Present Mike, also known as Hizashi, entered with a bright smile. He noticed Izuku's gloomy expression and sat beside him on the bed, pulling him into a hug. Izuku remembered how they had grown closer recently. A few days ago, he had gone to speak with his dad about an assignment, only to find him asleep in his office. Mike had been there and had blushed intensely when he realized Izuku was watching him kiss Dad's cheek. After that, they had a brief conversation where Mike revealed his long-standing love for Izuku's dad, dating back to their time at 𝐿. 12 years ago. Izuku sensed that his dad felt the same way but might not fully understand his emotions. He had promised Mike that he would help him and Dad get together, no matter what. Returning to the present, Mike encouraged Izuku to talk, assuring him that he was there for him. Izuku managed a weak smile, but tears began to fall. Mike hugged him tighter, gently brushing his fingers through Izuku's hair, comforting him. He whispered that it was okay to let it all out. After a few moments, Izuku took a deep breath and looked up at Mike, who was smiling reassuringly. Izuku shared his thoughts, explaining that he knew Dad was okay with him dating Kaken and accepted him being gay. However, he felt conflicted about his feelings for both Kirishima and Kaminari. He worried that Dad might think he was strange or feel disgusted by it. At some point, tears streamed down his face, but Mike held him close, whispering that everything would be all right. Once Izuku calmed down, he wiped his eyes and met Mick's encouraging gaze. Izuku felt a surge of confidence as he listened to Mick's reassuring words. Mike expressed with certainty that Izuku's father would never feel disgust towards him. Though Aizawa struggled to show his emotions, Mike could sense the deep care and love he held for his son. This understanding was one of the reasons Mike had developed feelings for Aizawa. As Izuku absorbed this, he leaped onto Mike, causing them both to tumble onto the bed. Laughter filled the room as they settled, Izuku resting his head on Mick's chest, a smile gracing his face. He suggested that Mike should ask Aizawa out on a date. As sleep began to take over, the last thing Izuku heard was Mick's enthusiastic agreement, and then everything faded to darkness. Aizawa stood outside Izuku's room, listening to the heartfelt exchange between his son and Mike. A warmth spread through him at the sight of Izuku opening up to someone, even if it wasn't him. He couldn't help but smile when he heard Mike confess his feelings. Aizawa entered the room and took a seat, observing Mick's affectionate gaze as he watched Izuku sleep peacefully. Aizawa nodded in agreement with Mick's comment about Izuku's cuteness, a smirk forming on his lips as he teased Mike about his feelings. Mike, caught off guard, blushed deeply as he sat up carefully to avoid waking Izuku. He admitted to Aizawa that he had feelings for him, a confession that made him turn away shyly. Aizawa approached Mike and gently lifted his chin, encouraging him to go on a date with him. Mick's eyes widened in surprise as he stumbled over his words, but when Aizawa began to leave, Mike grasped his wrist, agreeing to the date. Aizawa nodded and exited the room, closing the door behind him. Once outside, he hid his face in his hands, feeling flustered by the situation, and mumbled to himself about feeling too old for such emotions as he headed off to get some coffee. When Izuku awoke, he noticed Mike sitting on the bed, his face flushed and lost in thought. Stretching his arms overhead, Izuku greeted him, causing Mike to jump slightly before smiling back. Izuku settled next to him, resting his head on Mick's shoulder and asking what was wrong. Mike, looking nervous, finally blurted out that Aizawa had asked him out on a date, which sent Izuku into a fit of excitement. He squeezed Mike tightly, exclaiming that they needed to plan the date and find him a new outfit. Mike smiled at Izuku's enthusiasm and promised to let him know the details so they could go shopping together. Izuku playfully suggested that if things went well, Mike could become his new dad. Mike laughed, surprised by the comment, and expressed his uncertainty about being a good father. Izuku reassured him that he would be a cool dad, and Mike returned the hug with a smile. Just then, the door swung open, and 𝐾𝐿, Kirishima, and Kaminari entered. Mike stood up, sending Izuku a quick wink before leaving the room. Izuku felt his cheeks heat up, annoyed at Mike's teasing about being alone with the boys he liked. He shook his head, trying to shake off the blush as 𝐾𝐿 and the others gathered around the bed. Kaminari sat down beside Izuku, concern evident in his eyes as he asked how he was feeling. Izuku smiled and held his hand, assuring him he was doing much better, though a bit tired. 𝐾𝐿 rolled his eyes, demanding more space as Izuku climbed onto Kaminari's lap, resting his head against his chest. 𝐾𝐿 begrudgingly sat down and pulled Kirishima onto his lap as well, causing Kirishima to blush. Izuku smiled gently at Kirishima, who reached out to take his hand. They intertwined their fingers, and Izuku also held 𝐾𝐿's hand with his free one. 𝐾𝐿, with a playful grin, requested a kiss. Izuku smiled, shifting to face him while still resting against Kaminari. Kiri adjusted himself, creating space for the kiss. 𝐾𝐿 gently held Izuku's chin, urging him closer. As their lips brushed together, Izuku felt a rush of warmth, and he opened his mouth slightly, inviting 𝐾𝐿 in. The kiss deepened, filled with excitement and affection, as they shared a moment that was both sweet and exhilarating. 𝐾𝐿 wore a smirk as he playfully pressed against Kiri. After they pulled away, breathing, 𝐾𝐿 leaned in close to my ear and suggested that perhaps we should entertain the others since they seemed quite flustered. I nodded in agreement, glancing at the others who were flushed and breathing heavily. Turning to Kiri, who was watching us intently, I gently grasped his chin, mirroring 𝐾𝐿's earlier gesture. I turned his face toward mine and kissed him passionately. He seemed surprised at first but quickly reciprocated. Our tongues danced together as we playfully vied for 𝗟𝗏s, with Kiri ultimately taking the lead by teasingly skiing on my tongue and bottom lip. Meanwhile, I could feel Cammy's excitement as I continued to grind against him, while Kiri mirrored my actions with 𝐾𝐿. We slowly pulled apart, breathing, a thin strand of saliva connecting us. I liked my lips, gazing into Kiri's eyes and smiled, feeling the moment's warmth. Our attention shifted to 𝐾𝐿, who was enthusiastically exploring Cammy's mouth with his tongue. I leaned down to Cammy's neck, planting soft bites and kisses while rubbing against him, feeling his hands pull me closer. I whispered teasingly into his ear, noting how eager he was, causing him to shudder beneath me. I glanced over at Kiri, who was leaving affectionate marks on 𝐾𝐿's neck. Kiri remarked on how good the boys looked beneath us, and I grinned in agreement, adding that they looked almost good enough to eat. 𝐾𝐿 and Cammy broke away from their kiss to look at us, 𝐾𝐿 rolling his eyes with a slight smirk while Cammy blushed and buried his face in my neck. I chuckled, running my fingers through his hair and mentioned that I was starting to feel sleepy. Cammy lay back on the bed, pulling me along with him, and 𝐾𝐿 and Kiri followed suit. My head rested comfortably on Cammy's chest, listening to his heartbeat, while Kiri settled on 𝐾𝐿. I smiled at the scene and reached out for their intertwined hands. Cammy joined in, and we all shared a moment of happiness and contentment. I remarked on how nice it was, gently rubbing their hands with my fingers. They smiled back at me, showering me with soft pecks on my head, nose, and cheek. I giggled, giving 𝐾𝐿 a quick kiss on the lips, a gentle peck on Kiri's head, and a kiss on Cammy's neck, where a blue mark was beginning to show. 𝐾𝐿 suggested we all take a little nap, shifting closer so we were all cuddled together in a cozy tangle of limbs. Aizawa made his way to Izuku's room to inform him that he could return to the dorms in a couple of hours. Upon opening the door, he couldn't help but smile at the sight before him. His son was nestled in a pile with Bakugo, Kaminari, and Kirishima, all sleeping soundly. He noticed the hickeys on Bakugo and Kaminari's necks. Taking a seat in the chair beside the bed, he watched them peacefully. Izuku began to stir, looking a bit uncomfortable, but Kaminari instinctively pulled him closer, gently rubbing his back. Izuku settled down again, returning to a peaceful slumber. Aizawa felt a wave of affection as he observed the scene, grateful that his son had so many caring friends. Izuku woke up after about an hour to find the boys still asleep and his dad sitting in the chair beside them. When their eyes met, Aizawa smiled, and Izuku returned the gesture, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. He carefully climbed off the bed, trying not to disturb anyone, and sleepily settled onto his dad's lap, leaning his head on his shoulder. Aizawa asked if he had slept well, adjusting Izuku's hair slightly. Izuku nodded, still groggy, and glanced at the boys on the bed, smiling as he confirmed that it was indeed comfortable to sleep together. Aizawa looked at him thoughtfully and reassured him that he could share anything, emphasizing that his feelings for him would never change. Izuku sensed his father's understanding regarding his feelings for the boys and felt tears welling up. He hugged Aizawa tightly, sobbing into his chest. Aizawa comforted him, rubbing circles on his back and whispering how much he loved him. Once Izuku calmed down, he wiped his tears and looked his dad in the eyes, expressing his affection for the boys and mentioning that 𝐾𝐿 felt the same way. Aizawa smiled genuinely, hugging Izuku tighter and acknowledging that he could see the boys cared for him, especially when they were worried during his moments of pain. Izuku playfully punched his dad's shoulder, teasing him about already knowing his feelings from a previous conversation. Aizawa blushed slightly, mumbling something under his breath. Izuku encouraged his dad to pursue a relationship with Mike, noting how amazing he was. Aizawa laughed, ruffling Izuku's hair and insisting he wouldn't discuss that topic. Their laughter filled the room, but it must have been a bit too loud, as 𝐾𝐿, Kaminari, and Kirishima began to wake up, slightly panicking when they couldn't see Izuku. Once they spotted him on Aizawa's lap, they sighed in relief and greeted him with smiles. Izuku cheerfully called them sleeping beauties, eliciting blushes from Kaminari and a small smile from 𝐾𝐿, who rolled his eyes before placing a gentle kiss on Izuku's head, asking if he had slept well. Dad greeted 𝐾𝐿 with a nod, and I smiled at him, sharing that I had slept well. Kiri, with his big goofy smile, made me giggle, but Dad cleared his throat to get our attention. He informed us that Izuku could return to the dorms but would be resting the next day, allowing us to keep an eye on him and ensure he ate properly. The boys looked thrilled, and I hugged Dad before joining the others in a group hug, celebrating the news with excitement. As we cheered for our sleepover, Cammy joined in my enthusiasm, while 𝐾𝐿 and Kiri laughed at our antics. Dad walked us back to the dorm before heading to his office, likely planning his date rather than doing schoolwork. Once in the common room, we were met with a flurry of questions from our classmates. Thankfully, 𝐾𝐿 told them to leave us alone. We reassured everyone that I was fine and then headed to my room to hang out. Upon unlocking the door, I flopped onto the bed like a starfish, exclaiming how exhausted I felt. 𝐾𝐿 closed and locked the door while the others settled on the bed beside me. Kiri stroked my hair and remarked on how much had happened in the last 24 hours. I smiled up at him and flipped around to rest my head on his lap, wrapping my arms around his waist and nuzzling into him, feeling his warmth. He chuckled and leaned down to give me a gentle kiss on the cheek. Cammy suggested we all take a shower and then return to watch a movie, which excited everyone. I giggled, pinching his cheeks playfully, and jumped off the bed to grab some towels. I collected a change of clothes for both Cammy and myself while 𝐾𝐿 picked out clothes for himself and Kiri. We made our way to the showers, with Kiri and Cammy going in first to put their clothes in the lockers. 𝐾𝐿 and I ensured the coast was clear before locking the door behind us. We put our clothes away and joined the others in the showers, where we began to wash up. While 𝐾𝐿 and I cleaned ourselves, we couldn't help but admire Kiri and Cammy, both of whom had impressive physiques, a testament to our shared goal of becoming heroes. Kiri and 𝐾𝐿 had a more robust build, while Cammy and I were 𝗂𝐬 but still athletic. As I moved to 𝐾𝐿's shower, I slid my fingers up his arms, and he looked at me with a playful expression. I wrapped my arms around his neck, suggesting we take care of each other as we usually did. 𝐾𝐿 grinned, and as he pulled me closer, I felt a rush of excitement. Cammy, slightly flustered, reminded us to be cautious in case someone walked in. Kiri, however, seemed intrigued by the scene unfolding before him. I reassured everyone that 𝐾𝐿 had locked the door and that we often found ourselves in similar situations. 𝐾𝐿 pulled me closer, and I felt his warmth against my back as he playfully nibbled at my neck. I encouraged 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝐾𝐮𝐬 to join in on the fun, reminding them that they didn't have to feel shy. As we all enjoyed our time together, we eventually cleaned up and changed into our pajamas. Feeling refreshed, we returned to my room, where we selected an action movie we all loved. We cuddled up on the bed with snacks, arranging ourselves comfortably. 𝐾𝐿 was closest to the wall, followed by me, with 𝐾𝐮𝐬 holding my hand and leaning against me, while 𝐼𝐻𝐬 settled by the window. At some point, 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 fell asleep, leaving 𝐾𝐮𝐬 and me to chat quietly. I playfully mentioned how exciting it was to watch him and 𝐼𝐻𝐬 in the shower earlier, which made 𝐾𝐮𝐬 blush. He admitted that he found it just as thrilling to watch us. I smiled and suggested we go shopping for some new clothes, specifically lingerie, and asked if he would join me. He hesitated, unsure if he would look good in such outfits. I reassured him that he would look amazing in anything, especially lingerie, and that it would boost my confidence. 𝐾𝐮𝐬 giggled and nodded, which made me cheer internally. As we gazed into each other's eyes, I felt warmth and kindness radiating between us. We inched closer until our noses touched, and he whispered that I was appealing. I blushed at his compliment, wrapping my arm around his waist and running my fingers through his hair. As we drew closer, our lips met in a soft, sweet kiss, different from our previous ones. This kiss was filled with tenderness and affection, leaving us both feeling warm and connected. They didn't use their tongues, but it was still an incredible kiss. After a minute or two, they slowly pulled away, gazing into each other's eyes. A smile spread across Izuku's face as he buried his head in 𝐾𝐮𝐬's chest. He suggested they get some sleep since 𝐾𝐮𝐬 still had school the next day. 𝐾𝐮𝐬 nodded and pressed a gentle kiss on Izuku's head, who looked up and smiled in return. Izuku pressed his lips softly against 𝐾𝐮𝐬's once more before pulling away to hug him again. They fell asleep, tangled together, with 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝐾𝐿 snoring nearby. Izuku's perspective shifted as he opened his eyes to 𝐾𝐿's smiling face, with 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝐾𝐮𝐬 standing behind him. Sleepily, he sat up and smiled at them, wishing them a good day. He stood up, gave 𝐾𝐿 a quick kiss, and then offered 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝐾𝐮𝐬 a kiss on their cheeks. After they left for school, Izuku climbed back into bed, hoping to catch a bit more sleep, knowing the day ahead might be dull. An hour later, he woke up feeling anxious. Usually, when he awoke with such feelings, it meant something troubling was on the horizon. The last time he felt this way was when he was with Mama and 𝗏𝐻𝐬, and he had warned them of his concerns, but they dismissed him as paranoid. Later that day, 𝗏𝐻𝐬 returned home to share that most of the league had been captured by the police, including his boyfriend, whom Izuku had never met but knew 𝗏𝐻𝐬 cared for deeply. This time, Izuku sensed that whatever misfortune awaited him was personal. He sighed and decided to take a shower to refresh himself. Dressed in pink shorts and one of 𝐾𝐿's oversized black hoodies, Izuku made his way to 𝐒𝐮𝐬, ignoring the stares from some boys and girls. He walked through the halls, offering his dad a bright smile as he passed by his classroom. Standing outside 𝐒𝐻𝐬's office, he still felt uneasy. Shaking his head and taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. Almost instantly, the door swung open, and a knife flew toward his face. He caught it between his fingers and stepped into the office, tossing it toward 𝐒𝐻𝐬, who dodged it just in time, the knife embedding itself in the wall. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 greeted him with a smile, inviting him to take a seat. Izuku sat down across from 𝐒𝐻𝐬, who offered him a cup of tea. Izuku nodded with a smile, and suddenly, 2 cups appeared on the table. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 chuckled, remarking on his ability to conjure tea before his expression turned serious. He noted that something seemed to be troubling Izuku and questioned why he had come when he was supposed to be recovering. Izuku sighed, leaning back in his chair to gather his thoughts. Knowing it was best to be direct with 𝐒𝐻𝐬, he expressed his concerns about an impending misfortune. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 listened attentively, his expression shifting to one of concern. He suggested placing a tracker on Izuku, given the uncertainty of what might happen and when. Izuku agreed, adding that they should use a tracker that was difficult to detect. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 pondered for a moment before standing up and instructing Izuku to follow him. As they walked, 𝐒𝐻𝐬 perched on Izuku's shoulder, a familiar gesture that made Izuku smile. They decided to inform Izuku's father about his whereabouts and perhaps check in on his brother. Outside his dad's classroom, Izuku asked 𝐻𝐻𝐬 whether they should knock. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 suggested they simply walk in, likely finding his dad asleep. Izuku laughed as he opened the door, causing everyone in the class to turn and look at him. He spotted Shiggy sitting with 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 and 𝐶𝐻𝐻 at the back. After smiling at Shiggy, Izuku turned his attention to 𝐾𝐿, Kiri, and Cammy, who were surrounded by the Baku squad. 𝐾𝐿 appeared ready to confront them, while Cammy and Kiri tried to calm him down. Izuku giggled as he approached his dad's sleeping bag, poking it until his dad's head popped out, looking annoyed. Upon recognizing Izuku and 𝐻𝐻𝐬, his dad's expression softened. Izuku giggled again, placing 𝐻𝐻𝐬 on his dad's desk. He playfully admitted that poking him was more fun. As he walked over to Shiggy, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 conversed with Izuku's dad. Shiggy stood up and enveloped Izuku in a warm hug, expressing concern for his well-being and reminding him that he should be resting. Izuku sighed and settled onto Shiggy's lap, resting his head on his shoulder, hoping not to raise further questions. Fortunately, Shiggy didn't press him for answers and instead shared that he had made good friends with 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 and 𝗂𝐻𝐻. Izuku felt relieved that Shiggy was being treated well and had formed positive friendships. Noticing 𝐾𝐿 and Kiri glaring at him, clearly annoyed that he was with Shiggy, Izuku couldn't help but giggle. After a moment, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 announced he was ready to leave. Izuku got off Shiggy, who gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek as a farewell. As he walked past Kiri, 𝐾𝐿, and Cammy, he flashed them a playful smile and waved, delighting in their flustered reactions. He hugged his dad goodbye, and with 𝐻𝐻𝐬 back on his shoulder, they departed. Curious, Izuku asked 𝐻𝐻𝐬 where they were headed. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 informed him they were going to Class H1, the Department of Support classroom, where one of the students was exceptionally talented. "I'm sure she will have what we need," the narrator thought as they continued walking in silence, with 𝐻𝐻𝐬 giving directions every so often. Upon reaching a door, the narrator smiled and knocked. When they heard a voice inviting them in, they entered a classroom filled with curious students, surprised to see the principal casually perched on the narrator's shoulder. The teacher inquired about their purpose, and the narrator let 𝐻𝐻𝐬 take the lead while they scanned the room, taking in the various gadgets. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 hopped down to the floor and politely interrupted, expressing a longing to borrow one of the students for a while. The narrator's attention was drawn to a pair of intricately designed boots that seemed to radiate craftsmanship. They asked who had created them, and a girl with pink hair eagerly stood up, rushing over with excitement. She proudly declared that she had made the boots, referring to them as her cute babies. As she explained how the boots could enhance the wearer's footwork, the narrator listened intently, impressed by her enthusiasm. The girl continued to showcase her other inventions, including a device resembling a gun that could create a blast in the direction it was aimed, with an adjustable dial for gunpowder usage. The narrator complimented her creations, which made her beam with joy. Their conversation was interrupted by 𝐻𝐻𝐬, who indicated it was time to leave. The narrator learned that the girl was 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿, the very student 𝐻𝐻𝐬 sought assistance from. Despite her loud and exuberant personality, the narrator found her entertaining. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 explained that he needed a tracking device that was discreet and easy to carry. Upon entering May's workshop, her excitement was palpable as she revealed she had completed a new invention. It was a tiny microchip tracker that could be injected into the bloodstream, remaining undetectable from the outside. She demonstrated the device, showing how it would latch onto the skin internally and could not be detected externally. The narrator was amazed and took the needle she offered, asking about the tracking device. May quickly retrieved a small gadget from a cupboard, explaining how it worked. The narrator hesitated, looking at the syringe, and May offered to assist with the injection. The narrator smiled and nodded, realizing they were unsure how to proceed. They rolled up their sleeve and tied a 𝗟𝗶𝐸 tube around their bicep. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 carefully located a vein and administered the injection, the cold sensation of the liquid quickly fading. Once it was done, the narrator expressed gratitude to May and asked 𝐻𝐻𝐬 to keep the tracker safe. They bid farewell and returned to the dorms, grabbing a snack before heading to their room for a brief nap. As the day wore on, the narrator felt a wave of boredom wash over them. They tried various activities, from dancing to music to reading, but nothing seemed to hold their interest. After preparing katsudon for lunch and saving some for later, they settled in bed to watch a movie. Suddenly, an unexpected scene caught their attention, filled with tension and excitement. The narrator found their imagination wandering, picturing scenarios involving their friends. Meanwhile, Kirishima, having been invited by Bakugo to visit Izuku's room, made his way there alone after his friends got caught up in the common room. Approaching Izuku's door, he heard muffled sounds that piqued his curiosity. Upon entering, he was taken aback by the sight before him. Izuku was lying on his stomach, seemingly lost in his own world. Kirishima's cheeks flushed as he stood frozen, unable to look away. Just then, he noticed Bakugo and Kaminari entering the room, both equally stunned by the unexpected scene. Izuku, sensing their presence, opened his eyes and, instead of reacting with embarrassment, confidently revealed himself. The atmosphere shifted as the three friends found themselves in an unexpected situation, their expressions a mix of surprise and intrigue. Kaken helped me, and I felt a rush of emotions as I heard him say that. I glanced at Kat, who was clearly trying to hold back his feelings. Kat instructed Kaminari to lock the door, and he quickly complied, running to secure it. When he returned, Kat was already removing his last piece of clothing. I hesitated, suggesting that perhaps we could leave, but Kat assured us it was fine. He climbed onto the bed beside Izuku and positioned himself close to him. We watched as they engaged in an NTMT moment, and both Kaminari and I felt a surge of excitement as we listened to Izuku's soft sounds of pleasure, indicating he was nearing his 𝐶LMX. Once they finished, they looked at us, breathing and flushed. Izuku broke the silence first, expressing that it was clear they wanted to be with us. Both Kaminari and Kiri gazed at him with wide eyes before looking at Kaken, who nodded in agreement. Tears welled in the boys' eyes as Kaminari exclaimed that they felt the same way, jumping onto the bed to hug us. Kiri joined in, laughter filling the air as we embraced. I felt a wave of happiness wash over me, realizing we were all embarking on a new relationship together. Kaken leaned on his elbow, looking at us thoughtfully, suggesting that we should avoid keeping secrets and always communicate if something made us uncomfortable. We all agreed with Kaken's sentiment and established some guidelines for our relationship. We could share kisses and other affectionate gestures, but we should be open about it. We could go on dates, whether one-on-one or as a group, as long as everyone knew where we were. It was a normal relationship, just expanded to include 4 people instead of 2. After discussing the serious matters, I cleared my throat to get their attention, playfully admitting that I still felt a bit excited. They all smiled at me and Kaken leaned in, asking who I wanted to be with first. I glanced at the boys and then playfully reached for Kaminari, pulling him closer. He blushed and nodded eagerly, and I giggled as I leaned in to kiss him. Kaken and Kiri began to share kisses beside us, and we all took turns enjoying each other's company for the rest of the evening, discovering that we all enjoyed suching roles, which added to the fun. For the remainder of the week, we spent our school days together, also enjoying time with Mama and Shiggy. They were supportive when I shared the news about my 3 boyfriends. After school, we would hang out, watching movies and playing video games, and at night, we would engage in some playful activities, as Kaminari called it. On Friday, after school, Kaminari and I planned to visit the mall to shop for some new outfits. We were both excited, even though I couldn't shake off the unease I had felt a few days earlier. I was apprehensive about something that might happen, and I worried for my boyfriends. I dressed in a matching outfit that Kaminari and I had chosen together when we first started dressing up. Kaken hugged me from behind, complimenting my appearance, and I smiled, giving him a quick peck on the cheek. Kiri joined the hug, saying we looked adorable together. I giggled and kissed him back, enjoying the moment. I made my way over to Kaminari, who was at the vanity doing his makeup. I smiled at him through the mirror and kissed his head, telling him he looked amazing. He blushed and returned my smile, thanking me. I took his hand, pulling him from the chair, and we informed the boys that we were heading out. Kaken and Kiri gave us both a kiss goodbye as we left the spacious room we shared. My dad had transformed my room into a larger space so we could all stay together, and now we had an entire floor to ourselves. In the elevator, I wrapped an arm around Kaminari's waist, resting my head against his chest. I loved being the smallest among us, and he smiled down at me, kissing the top of my head. When we reached the common room, we announced our outing and said our goodbyes. We walked to the bus stop and took it all the way to the mall. Once there, we browsed around before grabbing a bite to eat. Finally, we arrived at the store we had come for and selected a few different outfits. I noticed Kaminari seemed a bit nervous, so I held his hand and led him to a changing room, locking the door behind us. I reassured him that we could try on the outfits, and if he didn't like them, we wouldn't have to buy anything. He nodded, smiling a little more confidently. We changed into our chosen outfits, mine a light blue while Kaminari's was a cute black floral design. When he finished, I couldn't help but admire how appealing he looked. I complimented him and he blushed, looking down shyly. I stepped closer, placing my hands on his waist, and playfully tugged at the waistband of his outfit, causing it to snap against his skin. He yelped in surprise, resting his hands on my shoulders as I gazed into his eyes, feeling a spark between us. As I leaned in closer, Kaminari pulled me in, and we shared a sweet kiss, feeling the warmth of the moment envelop us. He gently brushed his lips against mine, and I felt him open his mouth, inviting me in. As our tongues intertwined, the kiss grew more intense. I placed a hand on his thigh, encouraging him to wrap his leg around me, and I squeezed it softly. A soft sound escaped him, sending a thrill through my body. I could sense our mutual excitement as we pressed against each other, lost in the moment. Eventually, we both calmed down and returned to our outfits. After purchasing what we wanted, we headed to a cozy cafe to enjoy a drink and chat. It was a delightful time, and I found it endearing how 𝐾𝐿 sometimes turned into a flustered mess. He could surprise me with his boldness, like when he playfully nudged his foot between my legs during our conversation. I loved how unpredictable he was. The day was going wonderfully, and 𝐾𝐿 seemed to be enjoying it as well. 𝐼𝐻 and 𝐾𝐿 texted us regularly to check on us, which I found adorable. As we were finishing our drinks, I received a text from an unknown number. I opened it and read the message, which warned me to leave the cafe immediately if I wanted to keep 𝐾𝐿 safe. Taking a deep breath, I looked up at 𝐾𝐿, who appeared confused. Curious, he tilted his head and asked who it was. I smiled and moved to sit beside him, explaining that my dad was just checking in and that I would be right back. He nodded, and I leaned in for a quick kiss before standing up. I felt a sense of urgency. I couldn't let anything happen to him. As I reached the corner of the cafe, a hand suddenly grabbed my arm and pinned me against the wall. The man, with dark, unkempt hair hidden beneath a hood, had a disheveled appearance and a foul odor that made me feel uneasy. He instructed me to follow him, and I complied, glancing at the curious onlookers as we left the mall. Normally, I would have used my quirk to escape, but I couldn't risk 𝐾𝐿 getting hurt, and I had no idea what this man's abilities were. After walking for about 10 minutes, he shoved me into an abandoned building and closed the door, ensuring we were alone. I stood up and brushed myself off, questioning why I was there. He revealed his intention to make Shigaraki regret betraying him, a sadistic smile spreading across his face as he approached me. Realization hit me. He was the one who had used his quirk on me before, causing me pain. I needed to know what his quirk was if I was to endure whatever he had planned. His smile widened as he took another step closer, assuring me he wouldn't use his quirk on me this time. He had been researching me and dropped a shocking revelation about my quirk's potential to allow 𝐼𝐻. I gasped, disbelief washing over me as he closed the distance between us. The thought of him trying to get me 𝐼𝐻 was terrifying, especially since I hadn't used protection when I confessed my feelings to 𝐾𝐿 and the others. My back hit the damp wall as he loomed inches away, taunting me about how Shigaraki would be devastated if I were to become a father. I swatted his hand away, shouting that it was impossible. He merely chuckled and produced a piece of paper from his pocket, claiming it contained information about someone with my quirk. As I snatched the paper and read it, I discovered the truth of his words. The implications were overwhelming. Could I really have a child with all 3 of my boyfriends? My thoughts spiraled as I considered their reactions. Would they be happy or resentful? I couldn't let this man control my fate. Just as panic set in, The door burst open with a loud crash and my boyfriends, along with my family and pro-heroes, rushed in. In that moment, I was in shock, barely processing what was happening. My boyfriends enveloped me in a comforting embrace, and we all headed to the hospital to ensure I was all right. Sitting on a hospital bed surrounded by my loved ones, 𝐾𝐿 held my hand as Mike asked if I was okay. Tears streamed down my face as I grappled with the whirlwind of emotions and revelations. The thought of possibly being 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿 filled Izuku with anxiety. After taking a moment to gather himself, he focused on his lap and requested that everyone leave the room, wanting to speak privately with his father and Mike. Although he could sense the hurt in his boyfriends and older brother, they respected his wishes and stepped outside. Mike settled beside him on the bed and wrapped him in a comforting embrace, while Dad sat across from him, concern etched on his face. Izuku expressed his fear of being hated by everyone. Dad reassured him that they would never feel that way. He held Izuku's hand, offering comfort, and Izuku smiled, leaning into Mick's warmth. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to share everything. He recounted the unsettling feeling he had upon waking, the tracker that led them to him, and the mysterious text from an unknown number. He spoke of the man who had taken him to an abandoned building, revealing that he intended to impregnate him as a means of revenge against Shiggy. Izuku even mentioned the possibility of being 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿 with 𝐾𝐿, Kiri, and Cammy's child. By the end of his story, both Dad and Mike were visibly shocked. Dad began by stating that he could never hate his son, Izuku. He considered the ability to bear children a remarkable gift, even if it was somewhat unusual. He emphasized the need for a doctor to confirm the 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿, assuring Izuku that they would support him no matter what decision he made. Feeling a wave of relief, Izuku jumped into Dad's arms, expressing his love for him. Dad's embrace tightened as he reciprocated the sentiment. Once they pulled apart, Izuku wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. He declared that if he were 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿, he would never consider ending the 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿, as he believed in protecting life. He would care for the child, whether alone or with support. Dad looked proud of him, which made Izuku smile. Mike quietly celebrated the idea of becoming a grandparent, causing Izuku to giggle. When he looked at Dad, he noticed a slight blush as Dad scratched the back of his neck. Curiously, Izuku asked if they were officially together. Dad nodded, looking away, while Mike happily affirmed it. Overjoyed, Izuku embraced both of them, expressing his happiness about having two dads. He pondered for a moment before deciding to call Mike Papa. Mick's eyes glistened with tears as he hugged Izuku again, overwhelmed with joy at the thought of having a child. Dad rolled his eyes but agreed to the adoption, and Izuku requested that they keep the news of his potential 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿 private until they had confirmation. As everyone returned to school, they bid farewell. 𝐾𝐿, Cammy, and Kiri each gave Izuku a hug and a kiss. Mama encouraged him to rest and recover soon, while Shiggy expressed his regret about the situation. Izuku reassured him it wasn't his fault, receiving a gentle hug and a kiss on the cheek before Shiggy left. Nizu informed Izuku that once he was feeling better, they would have a discussion in his office. After everyone departed, a doctor entered to conduct a 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿 test. He explained that an 𝐿TRSND would provide the most accurate results and asked if Izuku wanted his parents to stay. Izuku nodded, feeling the need for their support. Dad held his hand, while Mike stood close, wrapping an arm around Dad's waist and holding Izuku's hand with the other. As the doctor prepared for the 𝐿TRSND, he mentioned that the gel would be cold at first. Izuku nodded, watching as the doctor applied the gel to his stomach and used a device to examine his belly. Feeling nervous, he squeezed the hands of Dad and Mike as they waited. After a few moments, the doctor made a surprised sound, causing Izuku to glance at him with concern. The doctor quickly reassured him that everything was fine. Taking a deep breath, Izuku asked for the results. The doctor confirmed that he was 𝗟𝐼𝐻𝐿. As the words registered, tears welled in Izuku's eyes. The doctor encouraged him to look at the screen, revealing the presence of not just one, but multiple babies. As he chuckled, he turned the screen to show a black and white image. He pointed to two small shapes on the screen, indicating that they were twins. A smile spread across my face as the realization sank in. The excitement of becoming a parent filled me with joy. Dad and Papa embraced me, tears of happiness in their eyes, sharing in the moment. After confirming my 𝐼𝐼𝐴, the doctor conducted further tests and reviewed my great-great-uncle's medical records. We discovered that he had been 𝐼𝐼𝐴 for only 6 months, suggesting that my 𝐼𝐼𝐴 would be shorter than average. This revelation explained why I could already see my babies on the 𝐿TRS-ND, despite not being 𝐼𝐼𝐴 for long. Upon returning to the dorms, I felt reluctant to leave Dad or Papa, so they invited me to stay in their room. After freshening up, I lay between them on the bed, rubbing my belly with a smile. Papa placed his hand on my stomach, feeling the presence of my little ones. He reassured me that I would be an amazing mom, and as I imagined my children playing with their dads and mama, tears of joy welled in my eyes. Dad encouraged me to get some rest, suggesting I could think about everything logical the next day. I nodded, and soon we all drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Papa snoring beside me and Dad sleeping with a pillow over his head. I giggled and climbed over Dad to get out of bed. I smiled as I watched Papa instinctively search for Dad in his sleep, cuddling up to him and placing a gentle kiss on his head before returning to his slumber. I slipped on one of Dad's black jumpers adorned with cat ears, which reached my knees like a dress, and the sleeves extended past my fingers. Leaving a note that I was making breakfast for everyone, I quietly exited the room. As I made my way to the kitchen, I passed a couple of students and waved at them. In the kitchen, the only person present was Todoroki, who was seated at the table, reviewing some notes. I greeted him quickly, earning a small nod in response. I gathered the ingredients for breakfast and began preparing a plate. Once it was ready, I placed it in front of Todoroki, who looked surprised but expressed his gratitude as he began to eat. Just then, 𝐾𝐿 entered the kitchen and rushed over to hug me from behind. I greeted him cheerfully, informing him that I had made breakfast. Handing him a plate, he smiled back and gave me a quick kiss before heading to sit down. I inquired about the whereabouts of the others, and 𝐾𝐿 quickly swallowed a piece of bacon to respond. He mentioned that Cammy was on his way but had slept in. I furrowed my brows at that news, knowing Cammy was usually an early riser. Perhaps my sudden disappearance had troubled him. As the delicious aroma of food wafted through the kitchen, a few others arrived, and I happily served them all plates. When Kiri and Cammy finally came down, they rushed to me, enveloping me in a big hug. 𝐾𝐿 smiled at the scene, and when Kiri pulled away, he gave me a quick kiss before taking his plate. However, Cammy remained by my side, still holding my arm. With the table buzzing with chatter, I leaned in to whisper to Cammy, apologizing for any worry I might have caused him. He playfully insisted that I call him by his first name, just like I did at the cafe. I looked up at him, finding his pout adorable, and nodded, giving him a kiss. He took his plate and joined the others at the table. When Papa and Dad entered the kitchen, I greeted them with their breakfast and smiled widely. Papa leaned in, teasingly whispering that I was already looking like a mother. I felt a blush creep onto my cheeks and playfully nudged him. Dad wore a slight smile, having shown a range of emotions over the past 24 hours. As everyone enjoyed their meal, I contemplated when to share the news of my 𝐼𝐼𝐴 with the boys. I decided it would be better to tell them sooner rather than later, especially since I wouldn't be participating in hero training anymore. About a week had passed since I learned about my 𝐼𝐼𝐴, and I informed Nizu so he could adjust my schedule around my doctor's appointments. He was genuinely happy for me and mentioned that my babies would call him Uncle Nizu, which I didn't mind since we had developed a close bond. I planned a date with my boyfriends for today, intending to reveal my 𝐼𝐼𝐴 in the evening. Papa suggested we spend the night in his cottage in the woods. I felt a mix of nerves and excitement as I anticipated starting this new chapter of my life with my 3 wonderful boyfriends and our babies. Dressed and ready for the date, I took a moment to calm my nerves while waiting for them. We had agreed to dress in separate rooms to surprise each other. Dad and Papa entered, smiling at me. Papa complimented my appearance, saying I looked amazing and that my boyfriends wouldn't know what to do with themselves. I smiled back at him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. Dad asked how I felt about sharing the news, and while I admitted to feeling nervous, I also expressed confidence in their support. I knew they were not the type to abandon me. Dad nodded, offering an encouraging smile as I prepared to head out. After saying my goodbyes, I took the keys to the cottage and waited in the common room for one of them to arrive. The first to come down was Denki, looking lovely in a cute white dress adorned with sunflowers. When he approached, she greeted him with a kiss and complimented him on his appearance, telling him he looked appealing. He blushed and smiled, admiring her dress. She twirled around, knowing he would notice the stylish underwear she had bought during their shopping trip. His blush deepened as he pulled her closer, whispering that he was wearing his own special underwear. She smirked and kissed him again. Suddenly, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 entered the room, looking sharp in a white polo shirt, black dress breathes, and a black cardigan. She ran over to him, hugged him tightly, and kissed him, making him chuckle. He returned the affection by kissing Denki as well. She proudly declared how cute she and Denki looked together, spinning them both around, momentarily forgetting about their matching underwear. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 smirked at the sight and pulled them both closer, playfully commenting on how they looked attractive. He then mentioned that they could call him by his first name now, to which she happily agreed. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 playfully grabbed their waists, causing them to blush and squeal in surprise. He teased them about his ability to easily overpower them, winking mischievously. Just then, 𝗏𝐵𝐸 appeared behind 𝐼𝐻𝐬, wrapping his arms around him and teasingly pronouncing 𝐼𝐻𝐬's name syllable by syllable. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 blushed and turned to face 𝗏𝐵𝐸, who was dressed in a black jumper adorned with blue flames and black trousers, accessorized with a chain around his neck. Denki and she laughed at 𝐼𝐻𝐬 as 𝗏𝐵𝐸 kissed him, then turned to kiss both of them, complimenting their looks. They all left the house hand in hand, heading towards the car that their dad had lent them. 𝗏𝐵𝐸 took the wheel while Denki claimed the front seat. She settled in the back, resting her head on 𝐼𝐻𝐬's shoulder while absent-mindedly stroking her stomach. She noticed 𝗏𝐵𝐸 had one hand on Denki's thigh, gently rubbing circles as he drove. She tapped 𝐼𝐻𝐬's shoulder and pointed at them with a smile. When he saw what she was indicating, he smiled and kissed her head, calling it cute. Their first stop was an arcade, and Denki's eyes lit up at the sight. They all jumped out of the car and rushed inside, spending 2 hours playing various games. A group of boys shot them odd looks, but they quickly fled when they noticed 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝗏𝐵𝐸 glaring at them, which she found amusing. After growing bored, they headed to a small restaurant for lunch. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and 𝗏𝐵𝐸 sat next to each other while she and Denki sat across from them. Lunch was enjoyable, but she had to rush to the restroom and was sick when the waiter brought out 𝗏𝐵𝐸's spicy dish. She explained it away as something she had eaten, and they seemed to accept her excuse for the time being. After finishing their meal, they went shopping for ingredients for dinner at the cottage. She and 𝗏𝐸 promised the boys they would prepare something special. Once they finished shopping, they returned to the car and set off for the cottage. As they arrived, she felt her nerves rising, knowing she had important news to share. After unpacking, Denki suggested watching a movie, so they settled on the couch while she went to change. She slipped into a pair of shorts and one of 𝐼𝐻𝐬's old red jumpers, which reached her mid-thigh. Looking in the mirror, she lifted the jumper slightly to reveal her small bump, a sign of her 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐬 that was showing earlier than expected due to having twins. She pulled the jumper back down and walked into the living room, where 𝗏𝐵𝐸 was leaning against 𝐼𝐻𝐬 while Denki lay on 𝗏𝐸. They looked at her with curiosity as she stood before them, her nervousness evident. Taking a deep breath, she smiled at them and announced that she had something important to share. They all nodded, encouraging her to continue. She explained that the man who had taken her the previous week had revealed his intention to get her 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐸 as a way to get back at Shigaraki. The mention of the man made them tense, but she reassured them. She revealed that, surprisingly, she could indeed become 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐸. Their eyes widened in disbelief, and she felt a wave of anxiety until Denki expressed his excitement, noting how amazing it was that she could have children. 𝗏𝐸 supported Denki's sentiment, promising to be there for her no matter what. She was taken aback by his warmth and smiled at him. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 echoed their support, assuring her that they would face this together. Taking another deep breath, she prepared to share more. She explained that her great-great-uncle had experienced a similar situation, becoming 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐸 with 5 children during his first 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐬. She elaborated that he had a child with 2 different fathers during his second 𝐼𝐼𝐬𝐲𝐬, resulting in a child with DNA from both. They stared at her in surprise, and then their faces lit up with joy at the possibility. She nodded, confirming that if she had a child with all of them, it could carry all of their DNA. Their excitement was palpable, and 𝗏𝐼𝐬𝐲 exclaimed how incredible it was that she could give them all a child that belonged to each of them. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as they reacted positively, and she took a moment to gather her thoughts before continuing. They all looked at me as realization dawned on them. Denki stood up, took my hand, and his eyes sparkled with hope. I smiled at him and nodded. When I was at the hospital, the doctor had checked and I had my dad and papa with me. 𝐼𝐬𝐲 and 𝐾𝐿 also stood up, moving closer, waiting for my answer. I didn't trust my voice, so I stepped back slightly, causing them to look at me with concern. I smiled and lifted my jumper to reveal my small baby bump. Gasps filled the room as they stared at my belly. Denki burst into tears and gently stroked my bump. 𝐼𝐬𝐲's eyes glistened with tears as he carefully pulled me into a hug. 𝐾𝐿 tried to hide his emotions, covering his face with his hands. He stammered, expressing his disbelief. 𝐼𝐬𝐲 looked into my eyes, and I nodded, smiling at him. 𝐾𝐿 mumbled about not knowing he could ever feel this happy as he approached us, smiling and touching my belly. Denki sobbed with joy, hugging me tightly. I giggled and wiped his tears, giving him a gentle kiss. I revealed that it was actually 2 babies, and they all looked at me in shock before enveloping me in a group hug, expressing their happiness. 𝐾𝐿 excitedly talked about becoming the #1 hero so our children would have a cool dad to look up to. 𝐼𝐬𝐲 declared he would teach them how to be manly if they were boys. Denki expressed his longing for the babies to call him mom while I would be mama. They all seemed thrilled at the prospect of parenthood. We spent the rest of the night discussing our future and how we would love and protect these babies with everything we had. As we went to sleep, we felt nothing but happiness, with the boys showering my belly with kisses and expressing their gratitude. I was so glad they were happy. It had been about a month since I shared the news of my 𝐼𝐼𝐬𝐲𝐬 with the boys, and they had been incredible, taking care of me during my morning sickness. When I told 𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐽 he was going to be an uncle, he cried tears of joy. I also met 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽's boyfriend, 𝗟𝗶𝐻𝗸, who was Todoroki's older brother. He was enrolled in the villain rehab program, and both he and 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽 had been much happier lately. Uraraka had moved schools after her family relocated, and I didn't know or care where she went. Mama had been helping me prepare the baby's room, and while Dad and Papa assisted, Mama had a knack for cute decorations. Nizu and I spent most days together since I couldn't participate in hero training, and I felt smarter than everyone else. I had been so happy with my life recently, and today we were going to find out the babies' genders. On the way to the doctor's office, we were all excited to discover what we were having. I had a feeling one of them was a boy, but I kept that to myself to avoid getting their hopes up. When we arrived at the hospital, 𝐾𝐿 rushed to the receptionist to announce our names and appointment. We waited only a few minutes until the doctor called us in. He informed us that only the father could enter, but I smiled sheepishly and explained that they were all parents. The doctor looked at us and nodded, allowing us all into the room. I knew to sit on the bed, so I did. He applied the same gel as before, and I could hear the baby's heartbeats. I smiled at my boyfriends, who were all beaming with tears in their eyes. The doctor confirmed that everything seemed perfect. The babies were healthy and strong. He asked if we wanted to know the genders, and after exchanging smiles with the others, I nodded. The doctor revealed that they were both boys, and I instantly beamed with joy. 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐼𝐬𝐲 fist bumped each other and then embraced. Denki gave me a small kiss and celebrated with a fist pump, exclaiming his excitement. I giggled at their enthusiasm and sat up, marveling at the news that we were having 2 boys. My boyfriends hugged me tightly as we celebrated together. After leaving the hospital, we got into the car, and Denki and I sat in the back, holding hands. I noticed we weren't heading toward you, and asked 𝐾𝐿 where we were going. He looked at me through the mirror, smirking and putting a finger to his lips, signaling it was a secret. I rolled my eyes while 𝐼𝐬𝐲 laughed at my confusion. When we arrived, Denki and I were blindfolded as 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐼𝐬𝐲 led us somewhere. Once we stopped and the 𝐵𝐿𝐴𝐷𝐹LDS were removed, we found ourselves on the beach where Mama had taken me a few months ago. Petals formed a heart shape in front of us, and candles surrounded a small basket filled with food and drinks. Denki and I exchanged puzzled glances. We heard a cough and turned to see 𝐾𝐿 and 𝐼𝐵 on one knee in front of us. I grasped Denki's hand as we gasped, tears welling in our eyes. 𝐼𝐵 spoke first, expressing their love for us and how grateful they were to be starting a family together. He shared that without us, he wouldn't know where he would be or if he would have realized he liked boys. 𝐾𝐿 followed, declaring that we were the loves of his life and that he would protect us and our babies forever. He reflected on how everything improved when I returned, and he didn't know if we would have found our way to each other without me. Taking a deep breath, they both asked if we would marry them. Denki and I nodded enthusiastically, screaming our agreement as we embraced them. The rings they presented were identical, each adorned with 4 lines: red for 𝐼𝐵, green for me, yellow for Denki, and orange for 𝐾𝐿. We slipped the rings on and settled on the blanket from the basket, enjoying strawberries together. We shared stories and laughter while watching the sunset. I smiled to myself, contemplating what our future would hold. It might be unpredictable and chaotic, but I knew I would have my family by my side.